Can you handle the crowd while I go get David?
Yeah.
Do you want half a cinnamon roll?
Huh?
Do you want half a cinnamon
No,
roll?
I'll tell you, I just had a bite before I left, and then I decided to make a cup of coffee to bring along. So I'm okay.
Get rid of that. I'm going to call David. So much to think about.
Yeah.
I got to turn that fan so we stay a little cooler. Oh, the crowd likes it when I call David, so we should have a lot of people from England today. I sent an interesting email to a bunch of perverts.
Oh,
yeah. I think one ringy dingy. This is David.
Hello, Your Eminence.
Hello, Your Effluence. Well, there's 3 of us here today. 4, actually. I forgot the most important one, but the 3 that are insignificant are myself, you, to a lesser degree of being insignificant, which means of more significance, Pastor Clyde Holt, and then wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there may be 4. David, what do you want to talk about? It's been a big day.
Yeah, I think the progress that we're making towards the idea that there's been a spread betting syndicate set up by members of the Bullingdon Club and Rhodes Scholars for well over 100 years, and that can be used to analyze, for example, the assassination of JFK and so on. Over to you.
Yeah, I was just, as everyone on live stream clearly can see, I was just about ready to take a sip of coffee. And speaking of coffee, it's always good to share coffee with friends. David, I sent an email today that I think is going to cause a little angst over in England. And it almost caused some angst with you too, because what it was I was copied to an email that was very critical of the way the government is run over in England and what they're up to in terms of exporting terrorism and random killing of target populations, including Pakistanis, Afghanistanis, Libyans, Egyptians. They're hoping to kill off a couple 100,000 Syrians, Iranians, and there's one other country I think they're talking about. It starts with an I and it's not India. But David, I think the perverts, and that's the right word because they're perverters of justice. I think the perverts in England, I would say 2 of the leading perverts are, and in this order, Clegg and Cameron. And I think Cameron is basically going to end up either being removed from office or appearing to hold Slaggy Maggie's bag. Now, for those of us in America who don't know who Slaggy Maggie is, could you tell us, David, what that nickname, regardless of whether you buy into it or not, from an English slang standpoint, what does Slaggy mean? And Maggie, of course, is Margaret Thatcher. Over to you.
I personally wouldn't apply slaggy to Margaret Thatcher because I think she was a remarkable woman, but slaggy is a very insulting epithet applied to a woman, meaning she's some combination of slut plus poverty-stricken wench.
Oh, I think we've just described Thunder Thighs and Sasquatch. But anyway, regardless of whether you or I apply anything to anybody, that's a term that I read yesterday. A British writer was talking about the fact that under Maggie's watch, as opposed to watchful eye, Ed Heath and Jimmy Savile did some horrid things. And of course, I think both of those guys deader than doornails. But did you see in yesterday's news out of England, David, that Jimmy Savile had a room upstairs in his studio that there were 650 names, I believe it was, somebody can correct me. The names, in fact, let me go to a wall and I'll demonstrate this to people on live stream. And if Jack Mack or Craig is here, could you tell me in chat how the live stream quality is today? And there's a reason I'm asking. But I'm going to go to the wall right now and demonstrate what I read, David. So you'll hear me, even if you don't see me. I don't know if the people can see me. And it's not so important you see me, but you see the wall. Okay, after his more than 650 violations of young children, Jimmy Savile would go put their name, Jane Doe, age 12, appetite for sex, not enough. Performance, less than desirable. And then very unkind comments about physical features. And that, I think when anyone protects a monster of his depravity and of his, like now I know that you didn't grow up in the Wild West, but in the West, there used to be notches on gun belts or notches on guns. And what that was every time a gunslinger killed somebody that needed dying real bad, he put a notch on his gun. And I got to think, there's a great song called Run and Gun. And it says 20 notches on his sixth gun marked the something he had won. That meant gunfights, but that wasn't the word. I'll pull it up while you take over. But David, I don't think there's any way that you or anyone else can defend people of prime minister or president. And I'll take your old Maggie Thatcher and the elder of the two Bush guys. Of course, I didn't say G.H.W. Bush and I didn't say Ironsides. But if anybody knows the movie Ironsides, which, by the way, the actor was gay, that's another thing, David. The gayness that David Cameron is cramming down the world's throats, he can cram that somewhere else, somewhere the sun doesn't shine. I just came from, what's the name of that bar right there that I eat lunch at? Do you remember? Dean's.
Dean's, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Jack Mack, if he's here, I don't know if he's here because I haven't looked at the chat room, but the last meal in Plum City for the last Plum City plunger was breakfast at Dean's, and the two participants were somebody who's going to stick a plunger in David Cameron's receiver. As I was walking out of Dean's today, primetime TV, I guess it's not primetime, daytime soap opera was on, and two young men were engaged in a lip lock. You know, that may be okay for Cameron and his beard, my choice of words, Sam Cam Wham Bam, thank you ma'am, according to Tricky. But David, the ball's back in your court. How can any president or how can any prime minister condone the serial abuse by Jimmy Savile and his 650 victims, all of which are written on the wall, that wall, in his office? And how can people that were in the Secret Service and the FBI say, I'm picking this random year from history, 1989. If anybody were to Google 1989 White House boy prostitutes, Lincoln, Nebraska, Franklin cover-up, and I'm trying to remember the attorney in Lincoln, Nebraska, who exposed all this stuff. And he's not doing well. If he's still alive, he suffered from Agent Orange poisoning or something. And I'll think of his name. But David, speaking not as a Brit, not as a Canadian, not as an American, but speaking as someone who goes to church, there's no wiggle room on this Thatcher, Ed Heath, Jimmy Savile, G.H.W. Bush, and Franklin cover-up deal. This is an offense to God, and you can't hide between political parties or lifestyle choices or nation of origin. So now that I've delivered your tongue lashing, go ahead and respond.
I'm absolutely in agreement, Phil, but you see, unfortunately, your sister and Janet Reno, who was a lesbian pedophile and the Attorney General of the United States of America, and Jamie Gorelick, in 1993-94, they sexualized the White House and the administration by creating this extraordinary organization called DOJ Pride to represent the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered interests or community in the FBI and the United States Marshals and ATF, etc. And I'm sure that wasn't Maggie Thatcher behind it. It was your sister. That's why I'm after her big time. Now, back in the UK, I do believe that for hundreds of years, the use of children intergenerationally by very wealthy families to lock in aunts and uncles and cousins into permanent, unquestioning loyalty to the family, has been developed and refined to become probably one of the most powerful and dangerous tools or instruments for the New World Order. And for example, Wham Bam, Thank You Ma'am, Sam Cam is a descendant of Nell Gwyn, the mistress of King Charles II, who was a child prostitute in a brothel run by her mother for the Royal Navy. Now, bless her, she was a brilliant Reformation actress. Evil, yeah, possibly. But when you're a child and you tend to do what you're told, particularly if it's your mother telling you, and the result, of course, is a weapon. And in the case of your president, you have an 8-year-old boy in Jakarta whose mother is a card-carrying communist. And I think I would probably describe her as a slag.
Good.
Or a slut.
We're making progress.
And go ahead.
I say we're making progress. Keep on.
Okay, so Ann Dunham in Jakarta, when her child was 8 years old, puts him in the care of a cross-dressing male transvestite prostitute called Evie.
And also called Turdi, T-U-R-D-I. But go ahead, David.
Yeah, Turdi, which is appropriate, you know, to what goes on rectally between these kind of folks. But the poor kid is only 8 years old, right? And so he's groomed to provide sexual satisfaction to the so-called elite of Jakarta. And just to put that in context, that's around the 1968 period. But a branch of the Standard Chartered Bank that was founded by one of David Cameron's great-great-grandfathers, I forget his name, had been in Jakarta, or at least in the Far East, since the 1865 period when the opium trade was going full blast. So you end up with a guy who's fairly bright, nubile, I think that's the word that pedophiles would probably use, very skilled at sexual entrapment, and then he's sent to Hawaii to stay with, and I think that would be at around 10 years old, to stay with his grandparents, Madeline Dunham and Stanley Dunham. And Stanley is a pretty weird guy because he calls his daughter Stanley Ann. And their best friends are a couple of pedophile communists, one black, one white. The white woman and the black man are from Chicago, who delight in taking photographs of torture being inflicted on children. So this kid, again, nothing to do with Maggie Thatcher, this kid is then groomed by these clowns for a career that will ultimately take him to Occidental College on a Fulbright scholarship, it would appear, then to Columbia University in New York, and ultimately, thanks to the present Governor General of Canada, David Johnson, he's brought to the Harvard Law School, and then he's sent to Chicago. He comes to Chicago, I think, in 1991 to join as an intern with Sidley Austin, where his wife-to-be had spent 3 years there, and her predecessor or mentor in the use of pedophile entrapment as a political weapon was Bernardine Dawn, who lectures on torture paradigms and practice at Northwestern University. So none of that corruption has anything to do with, and I'm not giving you a tongue lashing field, nothing to do with Maggie Thatcher, who, from my point of view, she was the first scientist of any note to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. All the rest are just useless wankers. And she was a chemist, and she had a good analytical mind, but I'm not at all sure she was aware that the bureaucrats or bureaucracy in the United Kingdom associated with Crown Agent, for example, had controlled the imperial regions and communities and territories through pedophile entrapment extortion for hundreds of years. Over to you, Phil.
Well, just like President Bush on the morning of 9/11, it's his job to be aware, and I take the same charge against Maggie Thatcher, which you might say is unfair because she's deader than a doornail. So is Alexander Haig. He's deader than a doornail, and we're going to have his ass, cold or warm, which reminds me of Liberace and a joke, but we don't have time for that right now. There's a horrible problem that's been going on, and I'm listening to your words critically. You've just finished telling me that it's been going on generationally for hundreds of years in England. So let me remind you, it was my sister's 66th birthday Monday, so she can be accused of everything evil from, say, 1969 onward, but that still doesn't relieve the English people of their true history of abusing children for sport, and then they put notches on their gun belt. And I would like to think that BBC, which stands for Boy Boogering Club, and those wise asses in England thought they could confuse us by saying British Broadcasting Corporation, which doesn't confuse us at all, because right on the front steps, above the front steps of BBC headquarters, is a picture of an old Greek guy standing directly behind a young Greek boy. And so I think, I'm speaking as an individual here, I think my charge against Boy Boogering Club is quite accurate. I think my assessment of Jimmy Savile's uh, well, whatever he was engaged in while he was at BBC, a lot of his victims were victimized in the BBC. He also victimized people in a variety of hospitals. Correct me if I misspeak here, David, or any in the chat room. But now, in the news that came out of England yesterday regarding the 650 names on the wall, he's accused of having some type of relationship with people that were mentally vulnerable. Now, here comes the part where if you don't like disgusting, please go to the bathroom or go into the kitchen. Okay, I'm going to count to 7. 1, 7. He's accused of necrophilia. Now, I know what that is, but if somebody doesn't want to throw up, don't go look it up. But it's not so much what Jimmy Savile does, it's the direct relationship between him and the royal family, and whether the relationship is Prince Charles or Prince Fardingham. As an American and as a churchgoer, I don't give a rat's ass. But don't be sending that crap into our country, David Cameron. Over to you, David.
No, you're absolutely right. And the thing to recognize about Jimmy Savile is he was a pedophile pimp employed by the people who controlled the BBC from its inception, who were pedophiles in their own right. And so what they love to do is throw the pimp under the bus. So we all focus on Jimmy Savile, who was a pathetic individual, and hopefully draw us away from going up the chain of command in the BBC, which is a Crown corporation, and on into the Star Chamber and the Privy Council, and people like Nick Clegg, who is the Lord President of the Council, who, although it's a little difficult to follow the authorities here, it looks to me like the Lord President of the Council had a role, or has a role today, very similar to the spy master Sir Francis Walsingham had for Queen Elizabeth I. And that is, he's in a position to set up man-in-the-middle attacks on any target at any time, anywhere in the world. Now, obviously, it took hundreds of years to get to that power and ability, but let me just go back to this possibility that General Alexander Haig in the Pentagon in 1963 and John Profumo, a Bullingdon Club alumnus in the United Kingdom, who had resigned, I think, in August of 1963, from his position as Secretary of State for War in the United Kingdom under the Macmillan government. And he didn't resign because he found to be leaking secrets to the Russians. He resigned because he'd lied to Parliament about his relationship with Christine Keeler. However, if he resigns in August of 1963, he would have been totally familiar with the military applications of the satellite Telstar, which was launched in 1962, and was carrying live fax information, text, data, voice, etc., two-way flow of information or content between the United States of America and France and the General Post Office in the United Kingdom, which they say in April of 1963 quit because of some atomic cloud, ionization, radiation, etc. But I don't think it did quit, Field. I think by then the Allies, such as, if that's the appropriate term, including General Alexander Haig, who was bugging the White House, JFK and the brother, to see if they were closing in on him, and John Profumo, who'd gone to work cleaning toilet bowls at Toynbee Hall, which is a great place for pedophile entrapment, and had even entrapped Jane Addams, who got the Nobel Peace Prize in 1931, and she was the founder of Hull House. Anyway, back to the possible use of Telstar for the assassination of JFK. Now, I'll put up this picture again, Field, of a cricket pitch, because rightly or wrongly, I think the hit on JFK was done over the interval of a cricket pitch, about 22 yards. Just a little bit of an aside, then I'll hand it over to you while I collect my voice again. In August of 1964, I was having my hair cut by Jack Ruby's barber just off Dealey Plaza in Dallas. And I was talking to him about JFK and Jack Ruby. And this guy said to me, there's absolutely no way these people were acting alone. This was an organized hit, both of JFK, allegedly or attributed to Lee Harvey Oswald, and Jack Ruby, what was that, the following day or two, who supposedly walked up in front of Lee Harvey Oswald with an NBS camera on him as he poked a gun at the belly of Lee Harvey Oswald and shot him, killed him. So going back to the dimensions of the cricket pitch, here's what I think was happening. I think General Alexander Haig and John Profumo were both from their war experience. In the case of General Haig, his Korean War experience. In the case of John or Jack Profumo, his Second World War experience in North Africa. They were both skilled at or familiar with the techniques of using multiple sniper nests in combat. And when we see JFK and the video of him moving through Dealey Plaza, it's a little bit difficult to get it placed right, but it looks as though they, that is General Haig and Jack Profumo, were using a cricket pitch dimension to take out JFK, and the Telstar satellite communication systems for real-time surveillance of the assassination scene. So the dimensions of a cricket pitch, it's 22 yards long, and there's various terminology. You can see it in the picture. I'll just put that up again. There's the terminology of the return crease and the stumps and the bowling crease and the popping crease. And I'm going to ask you if there's anything similar like that in baseball, because there are some common roots here. But a batsman will be standing at the return crease, holding his bat, while a bowler comes from the other end and bowls at him, and the bowler is trying to direct the ball at the wickets, and if he hits the wickets, the batsman's out. What the batsman tries to do is clout the ball as far as he can, and then start running between the wickets. And if he gets to the other end of the pitch, and the batsman at the other end of the pitch replaces him at the bowling crease, then that counts as one run. If, however, the batsman hits the ball and starts moving, sorry, correction, if the batsman tries to hit the ball and misses, there's a wicket keeper behind, and that's, I suppose, someone like your guy who stands on the base in baseball field, who can catch the ball. If the batsman then moves his feet out of that return crease and the wicket keeper can actually knock over the wickets, then that batsman is out. Now, when JFK entered, I believe, an interval 22 yards length, possibly referenced by white lines in the road, one of the sniper nests had the job of stumping him, if you will, after his foot or his car left the popping crease. And that sniper team would have been paid, and I'm just being hypothetical here, let's say, and we might have to divide that by 100 to go back to 1963, $1 million per yard. So the first sniper team to shoot JFK from behind would have been paid 22 million, that's 22 yards times 1 million per yard, dollars, for hitting JFK distance, 22 yards distance from the other end of the cricket pitch. Conversely, the second set of snipers that hit JFK from the front would have been paid in 22 yards if they were able to hit $22 million if they were able to hit JFK 22 yards after he'd entered the box, just before he left it. And both sniper teams would have been paid nothing. In fact, they might have been actually assassinated themselves if they hit JFK before he entered the box or after he left the box. And that would be for the spread betting. Now, I don't know if that's made clear or you want to pursue that field, but that's my current level of analysis, and I think that applies to a lot of assassinations, including Wendy Ladner Bowdry in Vancouver. But over to you for comment.
Yes, and I think it also Deborah Furlong. What do you think about that one? I mean, don't give me that's a yes or no. Don't you throw Deborah Furlong into the same group?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I want to throw another group into that group, and the group gets bigger and bigger, and there's a type of fish called grouper, and so maybe I'll change my name to Eve's Groupier in chapter 23. I mean, well, wait a minute, I guess I don't want to sound that faggy. How about Buck? Well, I don't, it's the Groupier part. I guess I'm going to cancel that whole idea, David, but when you talk about killing Kennedy's assassins, in other words, pay them $1 million cash, and of course you got reinsurance on each of the shooters for $10 million. So they think they're getting a good deal, so they go out and take pot shots at the President of the United States and kill him, dead or doornail. Then what you do is you got to silence the shooters. Do you know where I'm going yet, David? Yes or no? And don't say anything other than yes or no.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, allegedly, at the same time, the royals, and I'm talking about the same royals who just had the warm pan change lane during a full moon, but when those royals were getting married, a certain mulatto was so offended that not only was he not invited to the royal wedding, but it was made clear to him to keep himself and the wide body out of England. So what that mulatto did was he staged a capture of a twice dead man. President Bhutto, I can't remember her first name, but it's Bhutto. When she was talking about how dead Osama was, she was struck with some form of lethal energy, and she died in mid-statement. I believe anybody in the chat room who thinks I'm all wet, just put AW, all wet, we'll get it. Otherwise, if somebody has some supporting theories or ideas or proof or links regarding Bhutto talking about Osama bin Laden being dead, and I think that statement was in 2006. I'm sure one of our master Googlers will find it. But the people that were snubbed because they were not invited to the royal wedding, they needed to upstage the Fox Royals. So what they did was they captured the twice dead Osama bin Laden. And then what they claimed had happened was SEAL Team 6 had gone in 3 choppers, and I think that number is correct, and if it's not, someone please correct me. But I believe there were 3 choppers that went over to whatever town that was in Pakistan and put on a street theater that could later be described as the capture of Osama bin Laden. Well, those same SEAL Team 6 guys that arrived in 3 choppers in May of whatever year that was, and it's probably, I'm guessing it's 2011 because I was over in England that night. And what you think? Okay, good. Pastor Clyde Holt says it's 2011. So I'm sitting over in Milton Keynes, and somebody's been pestering me lately. Not that it's too strong words, not pestering. Somebody's been asking me to give my assessment of the star value of Jesse Ventura, and I'll just answer that right here and right now. When I was in Milton Keynes in April of 2001, shooting a TV show with host Alex G on Edge TV, I was in the studio in person answering spontaneous questions that I'd been offered to take a look at before the camera started, and I told Alex that's not the way I roll. Pretty surprising talk, huh? Yeah, I said, no thanks, Alex. I'd rather hear him for the first time with the camera running. I said, that's better for my peace of mind. It's probably more stimulating for your audience, but thank you for the courtesy of asking me if I wanted to see all the questions from your listeners. If anybody wants to find this, just email me, fieldmcc@yahoo.com, and I'll send you a link to that show. But anyway, back to Ventura. I was on for half an hour live. The next half an hour, Jesse Ventura was on, and he was over telephone. So I don't know what it is about Jesse Ventura that makes him think it's unsafe to travel to England and talk in person in front of a camera, but I don't share those concerns. So there's my opinion of Jesse Ventura. I guess you can decipher what I'm saying. Regarding this guy who thinks he's the president of the United States, Barry Swatero, Punahou 79, he had a little problem with the SEAL Team 6 guys because they knew they didn't capture Osama bin Laden, so he killed them all. Did I just say Barry Swatero, Punahou 79, arranged the death of SEAL Team 6? Yes, I did. And David, you don't know this is coming, but I've now been asked to speak at a third place. I got 2 opportunities to speak in September and November in Texas. Now I've got somebody in Florida that has a patriotic group that may or may not wish for me to come down there in late September and talk to a public gathering. You know, I don't think I have to travel to Texas or to Florida to get this message out. I think the people that signed the 60-foot-long petition, and it's a petition to have Barry Swatero, Punahou 79, and Thunder Thighs have a real investigation of who did what to whom in Benghazi, and any real investigation of who did what to whom in Benghazi will lead to justice in favor of we the people and not in favor of Hillary, Diane, Rodham, Clinton, and Barry Swatero. They had a street theater arranged for Benghazi, and it would have come off without a flaw, except for 2 names, Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods. Those 2 SEALs were in Tripoli when the shooting started in Benghazi, and they hadn't been told that it was street theater. So they grabbed some nice little firearms and chartered an airplane, flew over to Benghazi, and started opening up on the guys that were appearing to attack Benghazi's building, whatever the building it was. It's reported as an embassy, which it wasn't. Then it's reported as some other things. But the truth will come out. It'll come out because 60 feet of signatures of special forces people is more powerful than Turdy's little boy or old man Rodham's little girl. And you can't hide forever. You pieces of human excrement that arranged the death of Christopher Stevens. Now, I know you didn't think he was going to die, but he died, and he died because of your street theater gone wrong. And your street theater went wrong because two SEALs, Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty, took an oath, kept an oath, and answered a call. And the call in this case was not to their number. But when two U.S. SEALs opened up on 70 paid actors, the paid actors went like this, put their hands in the air, and said, "Stop shooting. Dr. Morsi sent us." Okay? Dr. Morsi was the president of Egypt. The president of Egypt and the supposed president of the United States of America worked out this street theater, and unfortunately for those two items of human excrement, a couple of SEALs got in the way. Well, when I was over talking to Alex G on Edge TV the same night that Osama bin Laden got killed the third time, I had no idea that a couple years later that we would be pivotal in removing a lot of these bad actors. But Janet Napolitano, excuse me, I almost said Janet Reno, of course, who is the pedophile, lesbian, alcoholic attorney. And the only thing I can't forgive her of is the attorney part. The rest of the stuff, God will forgive her. But she doesn't know God, I don't think. That's not for me to say. But it's for all of us to hope that she does, because that's the only way she's going to have eternal peace. But David, I sort of digress. What Barry Swatero and his girl Friday, Thunder Thighs, did is they killed the SEALs, but they were really sloppy in killing SEAL Team 6. Because anybody, and I'm not a SEAL, although I do have a contact in the SEALs, and it's over in Virginia, and you look somewhere around Little Creek, you could find somebody from either North Dakota, Minnesota, or Wisconsin who has 4 daughters. And these SEALs do communicate. They know how to speak. Speaking of speaking and speaking of when you shouldn't be speaking, that brings up Tillman. Pat Tillman's dead today because he was a little, his judgment was a little bit flawed when he told some embedded journalists that when he got back to the States, he was going to become the biggest anti-war activist ever. And he was going to explain to the American people what our military's been doing in Afghanistan for the last 10 years. But Pat Tillman no longer has a voice. But I can speak for Pat Tillman and tell you that we're making $800 billion a year in Afghanistan producing opium from poppy plants. That's what Pat Tillman and his brother Kevin were doing in Afghanistan. They were protecting the Crown agents' heroin flow. And that heroin is used against a lot of different nations. To small degrees, the heroin comes into UK and US. To large degrees, the heroin goes into Eastern Europe. David, I think I've taken up more time than anybody wants of my opinions, but my opinion is this, that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama will be following Janet Napolitano into the unemployment line. David, over to you.
Yeah, I think you're right, Field. And talking about Benghazi, the roadblocks were set up around that compound to allow the red and the blue teams to go in and abduct the man from that building, probably take him to a hospital where he was raped and sodomized and tortured in front of a camera. And the signals were relayed via satellite and drone back to the White House so Barry could watch this live, because that's one of the things that turns him on. But the important thing that seems to be escaping most people, that the security detail that was meant to guard Christopher Stevens was hired through the US Department of State Secretary Clinton. And she has, I don't know if you know that field, but she has a Welsh background. And going back to that intergenerational thing, I'm pretty sure that she will have pedophile connections in her ancestry that really don't see the present as more than a blip. That is, these people have been doing this for centuries. Anyway, back to Blue Mountain. So Blue Mountain, which is based in South Wales, I believe not far from the General Dynamics factory where they produce the Bowman military radios. They were responsible for guarding Christopher Stevens, and they set up the roadblocks around the compound, and that was synchronized through the personalities of the Internet Movie Database run by your sister's boss in the 1993-4-5 period, Jamie Gorelick. Jamie Gorelick being the former Deputy Attorney General when your sister was Assistant Deputy Attorney General, responsible for the introduction of DOJ Pride and tasers for the female marshals and various other activities. Perhaps the most important as far as Benghazi is concerned is the creation of the United States Department of Justice Prisoner and Alien Transportation System, which allowed her, that is your sister, to move felons and marshals, let's say red and blue teams, in and out of a foreign country without the traditional use of passports. So your sister would have known exactly how to deploy teams into Benghazi to fake this anti-Western horror story that they didn't like the disrespect shown to the Prophet because of the innocence of the Muslims video, which was actually made in California by a felon, or scripted in California by a felon in the Bureau of Prisons. Now, let's go back to some technology here. To synchronize the roadblocks and the backhauling of content with images of rape and sodomization and torture via satellite, it requires some quite sophisticated military-grade technology of the type that General Alexander Haig and the late John Profumo would have been familiar back in the 60s. Where did that technology come from? Or where did the integration of those systems come from? Well, we now know it came from Vancouver in British Columbia. And specifically, when the McLean Group bought Vancouver Film Studios in the 80s, they started developing what's known as public key infrastructure technology that would allow them to splice in a fictional event which is applicable to a fictional movie, like, I don't know, Stargate, with real world background events. And the job of that splicing is done by a position called post-production coordinator. And as you mentioned earlier, Field, with Deborah Furlong, Deborah Furlong was the post-production coordinator for Cold Squad and for Stargate SG-1. And Stargate SG-1 has a fictional command center in a factual entity in Cheyenne Mountain. So what Deborah Sharp Furlong would have been able to do and was very familiar with is the technique of splicing in a fictional story with a real world story and creating a perception in an audience that something was going on when it really wasn't. Back to Benghazi. So the McLean Group began developing this Cisco-based technology for online production on the internet of movies And basically, I would suggest that the Internet Movie Database is populated today almost exclusively using the Cisco technology deployed by Signal Systems, controlled by Jason McLean up here in British Columbia. So anything other than a random hit, so an organized hit, an act of sabotage, or a mass casualty event like Sandy Hook or Aurora, the combination of cameras and satellites and drones and encryption will be provided by Signal Systems out of Vancouver in British Columbia. And what that allows the post-production coordinators to do is to splice in the story, the wag the dog story, with real news events, which explains the mass murder of the SEAL team. And you can tell me this, Phil, but my understanding is those are high-value military personnel, and you never put that many in one helicopter. Is that correct? Over to you.
Actually, I just sat down. I've been wandering around the shop. I do know the answer to your question, and I'll give it to you momentarily. But being a part-time sleuth, I noticed there's something missing in this room. The two clues are the yellow and green Packers planters. There's something red and white missing. And if Bucky Badger from Madtown, which is Madison, Wisconsin, he would know what the missing item is. I don't know where it is. But your question, David, to me was basically, is it routine to have an entire SEAL team in one flying vehicle? The answer is no. It's routine to have one SEAL team in 3 flying vehicles. Not only that, but when Barry Swatero, Punahou 79, ordered the wrongful death of SEAL Team 6, he had to have some military people in on it because they, in addition to canceling the 3, in fact, Craig, if you're here, or I don't think Jack Mack is here today, but one of the people that is from a military background and good with a computer certainly can find the name of the flying unit. There's one Army helicopter unit that does all the flying for the SEAL team. And it was not the Army Guard Chinook. That was not from the correct unit. So, I mean, this is rather sophomoric sloppiness that is going to define the end of the acting career in the case of Barry Swatero, Punahou 79, who's been acting like Barack Obama, who in turn has been acting like a president. Not a very convincing act, I might say. In fact, he was driving a Golden Spike with Reggie Love on the evening that Benghazi was attacked. And David, you have no way of knowing what's about ready to come out of my mouth, but I've been working on Chapter 3 rather slowly. Did I say Chapter 3? Chapter 23. I don't know what I just said, but it's Chapter 23 that I'm working on very slowly. These people are so certain that they're going to win that they've put up a copy of the unisex. You might want to listen, Ginger, if you typically fade out when I talk. Yes, the Army has a unisex combat fatigue, and it's being tested right now at Fort Stewart. But another thing you don't know, David, I got that, let me show everybody what computer I'm on. This is my Cray 7. I've got it disguised as something else. I can't tell you what it is because I'm not good with computers, but it's really a Cray 7. The other thing that, David, that you have no way of knowing is that the title, and it's the working title because it could change if something, well, the title won't change unless Hillary or Barry Swatero, Punahou 79, followed Janet Napolitano out the door before I put the chapter up. And when do I think I'll put the chapter up? Oh, I think it'll go up after 5 p.m. Eastern on Friday night, because I like to make sure that the FBI, CIA, NSA, those types of people who are not oath keepers take the weekend off while the oath keepers keep their finger on the pulse. And we wouldn't have a pulse ourselves, literally, as in we wouldn't be alive, David, if we didn't have friends in RCMP, CSIS, NSA, CIA, Navy intelligence, Marine intelligence. Uh-oh, I think I hear a foot stomper. Marine intelligence. We have many, many friends in many, many places that are oath keepers. And some of those oath keepers know that they cannot keep their revenue flow, they cannot look forward to a good retirement, or in the absence of a job and a retirement, they might also have some absences around the dinner table of either children or grandchildren if they acted on the information the way we act on the information. But I would like to say that even though it's not happening as quickly as good people all around the world, in other words, good people in Syria, good people in Kazakhstan, good people in the United Kingdom and Canada and America, most people are good people. Unfortunately, just like a toilet, certain things float to the top. David, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So looking at, I've just put up a picture of the Cisco gear for NIPRNet and SIPRNet. NIPRNet is non-secure internet protocol router network, and SIPRNet is secure internet protocol router network. So the SIPRNet is available to top officials in the military and the chain of command, many of them being your sister's cronies in the senior executive service. And the idea is that whilst data content in the NIPRNet should be allowed to migrate up into the SIPRNet so that it can be surveilled by senior officials in the United States military and the government, the reverse is not supposed to happen. And it may not have happened, at least systematically, until the McLean Group up here in Vancouver, British Columbia, suddenly realized that they could create, in a sense, war films as wag the dog stories by hacking the gap between the SIPRNet and the NIPRNet for the United States Department of Defense. And all they needed to do there was get hold of Cisco that provided the routers and switchgear to run those two networks, the SIPRNet and the NIPRNet, and extort or bribe or persuade them to build a hack that could operate as a man-in-the-middle attack on American military deployments around the world, and then attribute disasters to incompetence by the military chain of command, start firing the loyal officers and replacing them with, very interesting, you said there's a unisex uniform coming down the line, and there's an interview with Angelina Jolie, who, as you know, Field, is one of the members of the Octopus, the four women, for her roots in, I would argue, pedophile entrapment and unisex stuff. But in the interview, she's talking about her first movie that was sponsored by Alexander Haig through Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and it was called Hackers. And she says the nice thing about Hackers is, and it's non-judgmental, I think she used some kind of word, is the men dressed androgynous. Now, I don't know whether grammatically that's correct, whether she should have said men dressed androgynously, but apparently this woman has a fetish about masculinity and femininity. And at first blush, I suppose you could think that she's fairly feminine. What is that term? But if you're turned off by this description, she has muscle tubes masquerading as lips, which I think is a great line. Do you think, Field, that when she describes men in a favorable way as dressing androgynous, that she had in mind one day that be the same kind of uniform for men and women in the United States military, or is that just a diversion? Over to you.
It could be a coincidence, could be she knew she'd seen some plans, but if she truly is 12.5% of the octopussies, Oh, I'm sorry, I meant octopus. There's 4 guys and 4 alleged women that are going to be left holding Haig's bag. Notice I said Haig's bag. I didn't say Maggie Thatcher's bag. Which reminds me, speaking of that comment that I read yesterday in the media from England about someone being slaggy, I thought that that was in reference to coal mines because I think with coal mining, aren't there slag heaps, Clyde? Yeah, yeah. And see, Cameron and Clegg and Foghorn, Leghorn, and Sam Bam, Wham Bam. Thank you, ma'am. Uh, they don't understand that I'm from Wales. Of course they don't, because I'm not from Wales. I'm from Plum City, and I'm not from Plum City either. I just moved here 3 years ago. Where am I from? Gee, I don't know. But 25% of my DNA is from Wales, and it's wonderful. Watch how fast Craig Peterson or Atomic Betty find the link to this beautiful bed and breakfast in Powys, Crickhowell, Wales. It's called the Glyphaes House, Glifffaes. You don't have to be much of a Googler to find a picture of myself and Leslie Cook in the bar at the Glyphaes House. But David, these 4 women, like the one that's got tubed muscles posing as lips, to me, she doesn't look feminine at all. And of course, it doesn't matter about me because I'm old and old guys never have any fun. But Agent Chips, on the other hand, who is fictional, he has a lot of fun. And the reason it appears that Agent Chips has so much fun is because one day when he was a very young, let's say 57-year-old, it dawned on him that his own sibling and all of her ilk had horrid lifestyles. Lifestyles that are an abomination to God. And I'll leave it at that. I don't want to get up on a high horse because I might fall off, especially if somebody has done the magic saddle trick where they loosen the belly strap on the horse, and when you go doing a handspring up to your saddle, you roll 180 degrees and your Stetson falls off. If you don't know what a Stetson is, that's not my fault because I've moved the camera. But David, I was about ready to ask you something, and it was about these octopus people, and Craig won the contest, as I thought he might. Now, I can't believe he found that. In fact, Craig, in the chat room, would you tell me how you found the photo of Leslie Cook and myself sitting? This is great. Clyde, there's a hotel in Wales, and here is myself and Leslie Cook sitting in the bar of that hotel. Hey, I'll tell you what, I don't know who I'm speaking to. I know I'm speaking to a bunch of people on both sides of the Atlantic, but specifically, I don't know who might find this next comment stimulating. But I promise to go to the Glyphaes house in the 30 days following the departure of the second of these 2 names. And I mean from the departure, not from the world as in dead, but from the departure from the public street theater, which is called politics in the United States. When the second of these 2 people are gone, I'll go over to Glyphaes house and I'll buy a round of drinks. It'll start at 5 p.m. and we'll go until say 1900. And I don't know who will show up there, but we have Abel Danger agents all over the United Kingdom. Gareth Williams was Welsh, and this is going to sound boastful, David, but I'm going to come up for air very briefly. Yes or no, David, just yes or no. Didn't you give me permission not to be humble on Monday?
Yes.
Well, here's an unhumble statement. Gareth Williams, the Welsh master mathematician and alleged spy, was so good at breaking codes that they killed him. I mean, his own team killed him and stuffed him in a North Face holdall. And it was we, and the we, well, just a minute, I'm being handed a piece of paper by Clyde. He's got the update from the net. Thank you. when I say we, 7 years ago, it was David Hawkins and myself. Now, according to the numbers that you clearly see here, we have 1,317,178 people listening to this show right now, and I don't know how the tech guys can figure that out, but it's probably the same way that the agencies shrink our counter at abeldanger.net, where it generally shows 30 or less people watching. When we have more than 1 million, I guess I should, well, it's a good thing I shaved today, because normally I don't shave, but I didn't know we were going to have such a big audience. I'm going to straighten up and fly right now, now that I know there's so many people listening. But David, the non-humble thing I was going to state, and let me state it real clearly for those of us that are on the right side of things, that's the Oath Keepers and the believers. And it's even more important that the people who are neither Oath Keepers, and notice I didn't say Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, and you can't blame Obama for not keeping an oath he never took. And what oath did he never take? Well, he never took his oath of office. The first time he flubbed it, and then Judge Roberts, who has some children from another nation, felt pressured to pretend like he really administered the oath to them. And the second time, for you students of history on both sides of the Atlantic, you certainly would know from studying the United States history, culture, laws, and protocol that the President of the United States is always sworn in on the 20th of January following the election. Okay, what you didn't know was that if the 20th of January falls on a weekend, then they do it on the, I believe it's the first Monday following the 20th of January. And I'd scratch my head, but as you can see, it's causing my hair to fall out. And I don't want to be some old toothless, hairless guy that sounds crazy doing stuff when there's 1,200,000 now plus apparently from our counter. Let me show you our Chinese counter. There it is. It looks low tech, but you know, it's keeping up with things. Yes, the thing that's not very humble is the fact that it was we, Abel Danger, that caused the MI6, MI5 professional oath keepers in England to reopen the murder case investigation of Gareth Williams. I will go check the dates, but the reason they decided to reopen that was they wanted to look like they were taking the inside job murder of Gareth Williams seriously before I went down to Brave New Books and spoke on the 27th of September of 2010. And it was on Friday afternoon preceding the week that has the 27th of September in it. It was that Friday that it was announced in England that they were calling the FBI in to help solve the murder of Gareth Williams. And the connection between Gareth Williams, Wales, FBI, NSA, and Fort Meade, Maryland may or may not be the Ram's Head Roadhouse at 1773 General's Highway in Crownsville, Maryland. Now that's quite a mouthful, but if you just Google these items, Gareth Williams plus Ram's Head Roadhouse plus Naval Academy Dairy plus chips plus pastel, it'll all come up like a bad burrito. David, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Field. Maranatha asks a very good question about whether the red team and the blue team in these spread bet spot fixing hits are aware of each other's existence. My guess is probably not, but their handlers, of course, have to be very specific about what the red team's role is and what the blue team's role is. And principally, the combination of red and blue team is to place the event within the spread. So the big event in sort of macro terms is that JFK is going to be assassinated or the SEAL team is going to be destroyed that might otherwise blow the whistle on the scam in Abbottabad. And the spot fixing really deals in numbers and precise time or distance within that spread. And that's why my guess would be that the red team and the blue team are not aware of each other's existence. They have related but different roles. going back to the cricket pitch in Dealey Plaza, one team's job is to hit JFK the first yard into the box, and the other team's role is to hit JFK in the last yard before he exits the box. What that means is both teams get paid, i.e. they get nothing if they hit JFK outside the box, because then the spread bet is triggered and possibly very large sums of money, nowadays running into billions of dollars, gets transferred from the underbettors to the overbettors, or the overbettors to the underbettors. As long as the bookmaker, which we now know is the CAI private equity group, launched by General Alexander Haig in 98-99, as long as the bookmaker can keep the event within the spread, then the big money does not flow from the underbetter to the overbetter, or the overbetter to the underbetter. And that's, I believe, the language of pari mutuel betting. And that's not my bag, but anyway, I think that's what they would normally use to describe it. And what the bookmaker does is take 15% of the bet. And here we get into the arbitrage business. It would be very easy for a sophisticated financial investor to make money out of the assassination of JFK on the insurance market, or the associated movement in shares, stocks and shares and bonds related to the death of a president. Similarly, when both towers came down on 9/11, particularly the companies involved that took the principal hits, like Aon Corporation, Marsh McLennan, and Cantor Fitzgerald, the implications in the international financial market would be huge. It would be very easy to make billions of dollars just by placing your bets on the right side of it, provided you knew that the event was going to take place. Whether or not 340 or 343 or 350 members of the fire department of New York were killed would be irrelevant to the greater scheme of things, unless, of course, you had a significant reinsurance policy on the lives of those firefighters. So my guess, the answer to Maranatha is, I don't think the red team and the blue team know of each other's existence. They are deployed, exfiltrated and infiltrated with the crime scene independently, and they may go to their graves not being aware of any other players than their immediate friends and colleagues and associates. Now, just briefly going back to Jack Profumo, he was given the bronze medal for his performance through the Allies in the Second World War. And that was in 1947. So that's 16 years before the assassination of JFK. John Profumo would have had quite a high profile in the American military in the Pentagon, come 1963, when General Alexander Haig was operating as a staff officer. So going back to all the various people who are attributed as having a role in the assassination of JFK, coming back to motive, opportunity, and weapon, both men, Jack Profumo and General Alexander Haig, both dead today, would have had military experience, either directly or indirectly associated with sniper nest planting. Jack Profumo, being a member of the Bullingdon Club that was founded in 1780, would have been very familiar with the concept of spread betting on the results of cricket matches, etc., etc. And we know, not because Field McConnell tells us, but that back in the Vietnam War, General Haig and his ilk became obsessed with body counting in battles and encounters. And I can't remember the name of the battle, but there's one very specific name that they counted 592 dead Viet Cong after this battle in Vietnam, for which General Alexander Haig was acknowledged as a very brave soldier, of which no doubt he is, and probably very capable in a tactical sense, but deeply corrupt in a strategic sense. So let's look a little bit at this guy, Jack Profumo, and why he lied about his relationship with Christine Keeler. The Norway debate that brought down Neville Chamberlain helped to usher Winston Churchill into 10 Downing Street. If he had done nothing else, memorable. He would deserve to be honored for that. But he went on to have what the Brits call a good war, earning several decorations, including the US Military Bronze Medal, and I think he got that in 1947, and ending up as a brigadier. He was an effective House of Commons performer too, and he had shrewdness and common sense. Telling a foolish and easily exposed lie, that was his relationship with Christine Keeler, was the single worst course open to him. Why did he do it? Field, I think I have the answer. I think as Secretary of State for War, he would have had a very high profile in the event of the JFK assassination being tracked back through the use of Telstar to the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense, which, as you know, is got the master rootkit for the Entrust public key infrastructure, which therefore controls all United States military maneuvers today through a backdoor, through Vancouver, through Jason McLean. So I think he was set up, or he set himself up, to have a plausible reason to resign, that is lying to the House about his relationship with Christine Keeler, and forestall or preempt any investigation into his relationship with Russian intelligence. And remember, it is alleged that Lee Harvey Oswald was working for Russian intelligence. He wasn't, he was working for British intelligence, but that's by the by. Lee Harvey Oswald, around the time that the Telstar satellite was said to have failed as a result of some form of electromagnetic radiation associated with an atomic bomb, Lee Harvey Oswald goes up to Montreal and probably meets with one of General Alexander Haig's investor colleagues in the CAI private equity group maker for 911, a man by the name of Yves Fortier. And he gets paid as a member, although perhaps he doesn't know it, of the red and or the blue assassination team. My guess is he was one of the members of the sniper nests that were responsible for whacking or shooting JFK as he entered the box. Not before, but that first yard after entering the box. And I can't remember the name of the other officers, but I think there were probably about 3 snipers in the entry stage of shooting JFK from behind. And there would probably have been another 2 or 3 snipers at the exit stage as JFK was about to leave the box. Anyway, back to Telstar. So what Telstar, had it not failed, and I don't think it had, it would have given them real-time images and timing and communications to coordinate the red team and the blue team, position them appropriately, and set up JFK for that fatal 22-yard journey. And my guess is, with Alexander Haig's experience, that was his first attempt at a coup d'etat. That's 1963. So there I am having my hair cut in 1964 by Jack Ruby's barber, and I'm smelling, and there's no way I could have predicted things would have turned out as they did, Phil, but I think our God, whatever manifestation we individually believe in, had to have a role to play in bringing you and me together. Over to you.
Okay, I agree with all that. I'll stipulate out of court that all being the case, and I'm going to put up a link right now, and then I'm going to go, uh-oh. In fact, that uh-oh, I'm going to back out of the link. David, this is very interesting, and I hope Craig's listening, and anybody else that's really good. And I'll show you the website. I'd like some help in determining who these people are. And I don't mean, all I mean is what nation. There's the website, obfuscatory10, NGAS.com. I'd love to know who they are. I think they're Spanish speaking from the word putangas, which I don't understand, but I can go to Google Translate and translate it. And they have a channel. I know who they are. Everything on that channel is us. I'll read the channel description. Abel Danger is a resource and archive for the David Hawkins and Field McConnell forensic economic research material on 9/11, ClimateGate, the global warming hoax, economic fraud, and murder for hire. Pretty accurate, David. This blog also acts as an intelligence and counterintelligence resource for we the people. Whoever these people are, they sure understand what's going on. In fact, I just got an update from headquarters. Right here, you can see it clearly. 1.37 million people now tuned in. Once again, I don't know how Agent Ehrman, E-R-M-I-N, I don't know how Agent Ehrman keeps track of all this. But an interesting Google that I was just working on when I accidentally ended up here at Patangas, I was Googling Putin plus Iran plus Roxana Sabiri plus chips plus pastel plus IOC, and suddenly I end up in another country reading about myself. So if anybody has any idea at all who Patangas is, or I don't need their name. I don't want their name. I don't care who they are. I love them for doing what they're doing. But David, your question about God brought us together, I'm going to address that very directly in two different azimuths. Number one, God did bring us together, but God doesn't hinge upon the individual beliefs of myself, Roxana Sabiri, Vladimir Putin, Anna Chapman, or Clyde Holt. We, to some degree, depend on him. That's the way that relationship works. There's only one him, and there's 7 billion of we the people. Having said that, just for to lighten this up a little bit, I will give people a very lucid and simple explanation of how God did this, and then we can wonder why. On December 4th, Monday of 2006, I was driving down US Highway 10 between Dilworth and Linden, Minnesota, and I said a brief prayer, the salient portion of which was this: I think you have something more important for me to be doing than hauling 403 people to Honolulu so they can lay on the beach. So if or when you reveal your purpose for your kingdom in my life, you know it before I think it, say it, that I'll do it no matter what it may cost me. There's a lot of people, David, who think that my willingness to speak truthfully about the illegally modified airliners cost me something. They can think that all they want. I am better off in every quantitative way today than I was on the day I said that prayer. I have been relieved of the duty of dragging my suitcase all over the world. Were I still working for Delta Airlines as a 747-400 captain with a seniority number of perhaps 2 digits out of 11,000 total pilots, that would appear to the world to be a good deal. Well, the world can kiss my rosy red rear end. Dragging a suitcase around from Plum City to the Minneapolis airport and I'm contradicting myself to a smidgen, as CCW knows, and some of you others might have picked up. And don't worry, I'll cover the contradiction. It's not a real contradiction. But some people would think that at age 63, I would still be naive enough to think it's a good deal to sit in the left seat of a 747-400 with a seniority number of, say, 80 or 90 out of 11,000 and have another crew meal while I go to another layover in another 5-star hotel at some place like Tel Aviv, which is one of the destinations those airplanes go to. Yeah, I'd love to go to Tel Aviv. I'd like to go to Jerusalem. Someday I'm going to the Plum City graveyard. But just agreeing with you in a rather lengthy fashion, David, nobody but God could have put our network together. And our network is not just David and Field and Craig and Tim and Anita and Ginger and RPW and Gene and Jay Campbell. Oops, I almost slipped. I meant Trooper Campbell and Madtown and Bingo. All these people in our network, you notice I didn't say anything about Red Panther, even though I did in the chat room earlier when somebody called RPW RP. I corrected that party, who I think was Ginger Cookie, and I said, Ginger Cookie, RP is not RPW. RPW is our Abel Danger asset down in the hills by a big piney river in Missouri, whereas RP was Red Panther, who was some form of a mystic or clairvoyant or clerical or whatever. There's a lot of religions out there, and as far as I know, they're all wrong. There's Christian truth, and as far as I know, it's all right. But David, we were clearly brought together for some purpose that is on the positive side of things, and as anyone who can hear me speaking clearly now can see, I'm not dead. And yet we're sort of stacking them up like cordwood, people we've taken out of their positions. Peter G. Peterson was the chairman of the the Council of Foreign Relations was Peter G. Peterson. That guy's really a sissy because we wrote about him and within 30 days he'd stepped down. Another little girl, using the term little girl, first of all, I like females. I like girls. I like little girls, but only in the appropriate way. The Profumos, the Haigs, the Princes, and I mean Prince Philip, Prince Charles. I'm not going to say it in front of a bunch of ladies all over the world, and I'm not going to say it in front of Pastor Clyde Holt at age 84. I'll tell him later. But would somebody please Google search what it was that Prince Charles said he would like to come back as if he were to die, which will pretty much close the book on the civility of the royals. And it also closed the book on whether or not Prince Charles understands life and death in God's creation, because you don't come back in another form when you die. You die, and then if you want to read about it, you can find all sorts of good places to look, like John 14:2, or perhaps Hebrews 10 towards the 25th, 6th, 7th, and 8th of chapter 10 of Hebrews. But David, the short answer to your question is yes, God brought this network together, and I will just add one thing to that, and that's Philippians 1:6, saying just this, that he who has started a good work will carry it on until the day of Christ Jesus. David, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Field. And interestingly, you mentioned Peter Peterson, and it goes back quite a while, but if I recollect what we did, we wrote to him when he was the chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations. And we actually, I think we had an email. And so we sent the email to him directly. And I think within 30 days, he resigned his position as chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is quite a coup. But what we accused him of is that he was chairman also of the Blackstone Private Equity Group, which bought the lease on Building 7, sometimes known as the Salomon Building, which on the 18th floor had offices for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which was run by your sister's lesbian mate, Leonora Guaria, now dead, with set-aside offices for the Small Business Administration, run by your sister as Chief Operating Officer, through the 911 body counting of the victims to be killed or murdered in the attack of 911, and to make sure that everything got within the spread. But just going back to Alexander Haig, he supplied the zoomatic camera to Mr. Zapruder. And my guess is he didn't supply one, well, he might have supplied one to Zapruder, but I would say, I would predict, field that we will find at least 10 zoomatic 8 cameras around Dealey Plaza to record the money shot for the sniper teams emplaced by General Alexander Haig and Brigadier Jack Profumo. Because without the money shots, I've got a dog that I've just got to take care of. Phil, can you hop back in for a few minutes?
You're making me uncomfortable when you say you've got a dog you've got to take care of, and we're talking about the perversions of the people over there from Profumo to Prince Charles. But David, you just yell fire hose when you're back. And speaking of dogs that didn't bark, I'm going to challenge Craig Peterson or Atomic Betty to see who's got the fastest mouse in town, because our agent Susie Q put up a YouTube, and it's about, well, you can find it by searching YouTube for Pastel Lemon Chiffon, and I don't know the name of the YouTube, but it has a picture of some woman and a white poodle sitting on the left front fender of my 36 Studebaker. And of course, I don't say that in a materialistic sense. Back when David asked if God put our network together, yes, in all sincerity, God put our network together. I didn't answer why. Why did he put our network together? I don't know, but I think Ephesians 5:11 is a good place to start searching for the answer. I'm not going to ask God why he put our network together. You know why? In fact, watch this. I hate to do this to you, but no pressure on Pastor Clyde Holt, but I'm just interested in how he'd answer the question. And then regardless of how he answers it, I'll answer my own question. But I just said I was not in, I don't need to know why God put our network together. Do you have any idea what I might have been thinking? Okay, see, I said God did put our network together.
Yeah.
I think it might have something to do with exposing evil, as is written in Ephesians 5:11. But the reason I don't ask God, and I do talk to him, I talk to him, it's real easy. For those people who don't know how to pray, it's simple. You're watching me talk to Clyde Holt. Actually, you're watching Clyde Holt. Now you're watching me talk to Clyde Holt. I know how to talk to Clyde Holt. I greet him first. I say, "Good afternoon, Clyde. How are you?" Like that. And then he talks back. Well, Clyde Holt is made in the image of God. That's what I've read in the Bible, which means that if God were sitting here, I could talk to God just like I talked to Clyde. I couldn't see him, I don't believe, because I think he would show up as a brilliant white light that would have such great energy that I'd turn my face away. But it doesn't matter. I know how to talk to him. And it's just like I talk to Clyde Holt. I greet him, then I speak what's on my mind, and then I say thank you. But the reason I don't ask God why he brought this network together, it's none of my business. He brought the network together, and the network has sequentially had a series of assignments. But if you want to make it real simple for people that are just, there's a name for this. If people are just getting started in believing or in trying to recognize and unmask evil, God, who will reveal why he's done this later, I firmly believe that he is desiring to use simple, humble humans that appear to be failures to defeat the people that are the most evil, whatever that word is. They're beyond criminal. They're evil. Jimmy Savile writing 650 little girls' names on the wall. I guess I won't be seeing Jimmy Savile because he went to the smoking section. I think there's a lot of men out there that really should be ashamed of themselves. Each of those 650 little girls had a dad. Each of those 650 little girls had a big brother. And phony baloney ferret-faced Jimmy Savile's awfully lucky he never came face to face with any of those fathers or brothers of the 650 little girls. I don't know what his youngest victim was, but in the article I read in today's news on Jimmy Savile, the number 11, which just happens to be the number on the side of that 1937 Studebaker President bulletproof inch-and-a-half windows with shooting ports car. I stuck it on there. Would somebody please pull up the picture of the Canton? And this is another indication of God's micromanaging Abel Danger. The picture on this 1937 Studebaker Presidential 8 police car, it says, and I don't have it up in front of me, watch this, you guys will see it live, I won't see it because I'm busy talking to you. When the picture comes up live, I will be looking over by Clyde Holt, who will be looking for the picture, and maybe he'll signal me. When you see a black car show up with a long hood, what you're going to see is a Canton police car from Canton, Ohio. In gold lettering on the side, it says Canton Police Flying Squadron. You can't make this stuff up, and it's car number 11. There it is. Okay, let me just focus on this car. In fact, Craig told me that if I click on this, it'll go up here. Okay, look at this, folks. Studebaker, 1937 Studebaker Presidential. Actually, that's my mistake. President, not presidential. This car weighs 5,400 pounds. It's a Studebaker. Why does it weigh so much? Bulletproof steel, that's why. What about these funny things? Those funny things on the windows are actually removable glass, and when you remove the glass, you got a firing port. You can stick machine guns through the windows and shoot the bad guys. Now, none of you have really caught, actually, I shouldn't say none of you. When I get back to the chat room, anybody who figured out, I'm not saying God did this, but he may have. Never say what he does or what he doesn't do because we don't know. But look at this, Canton Police Department, okay? Of all the cities in all the countries of all the world, why would this 1937 Studebaker President 8-cylinder flathead say Canton on it when all four of my limousines say Canton on them, and the F4 number 640965 is squarely parked in Canton, C-I-N-T-O-N. For the rest of the story, to be fair and honest, the police car in Canton is Canton, Ohio. The F4 in Canton is Canton, Texas, and the limousines from Canton is Canton, Georgia. But why should David and I be together? Well, we're not. I'm in Plum City. He's in a little town called White something. I know the name of it too. It's White Rock, British Columbia. David, I presume you're back, but I was just recounting how God certainly brought us together for his purpose, which I haven't asked him what he wants us to be doing, because it doesn't matter why he wants us to be doing anything. The only thing that matters is that we trust and obey. And I trust and I obey. Does that mean I'm a pious mamby-pamby? Nope. In fact, it was Pastor Clyde Holt who told me, and I think he'll stand by his words. I've never seen him chew them up and spit them out before, but he told me that back in his day, which was 2033 minus 33, 1,980 years ago, Jesus Christ was a macho figure. And I said, really? I've never read that. And he said, well, do you think a real wimp would go into the temple and start overturning the tables of the money changers? He said that was a fairly strong statement from Jesus Christ, and it was backed up with horsepower, his own horsepower.
Macho man.
Macho man, yes. Well, what I'm saying there is, and it goes back to Jimmy Savile, if any father or brother knows that an 11 or 12-year-old girl is being victimized by one of the BBC's darlings, I think whatever you did to protect the little girl would be just, and you could fill in the blanks. I know in my case, it doesn't have to be my daughter. My daughters, well, two of my daughters could turn me into a puddle just because they have pretty good strength for 19 and 22-year-old females. Since my second youngest daughter was 7 or 8, I've approvedly and smilingly said that any guy that ever does anything that she doesn't like is going to be picking his teeth up off the floor. And that's when she was 7 or 8. And now she's 5'8" and 165. I think in addition to their teeth being picked up off the floor, his whole head may become unattached. Because when you have raw horsepower and immense willpower, the people on the other side of the deal, they're going to have more than they can handle. Such was the case with the money changers in the temple, and such is the case with the enemies of God. And David, we're done looking at 1937 Studebakers unless somebody wants to put up the picture of the 1937 Studebaker President 8-cylinder car that's in showroom condition, that I think will be in Plum City within 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, but certainly in time for the Spring Valley Car Show, which is Spring Valley, Wisconsin. And does that mean I bought it? Well, I don't know. What does it mean? David, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Field. So, talking about God and truth and our network, that reminded me, and it's a bit technical, and it seems to be a long time ago that I studied this. There's a very famous physicist called Feynman, and he talks about energy, potential and kinetic energy. Now, everyone that's listening to this show, you and Clyde and me, we have potential energy, and in as much as we get up off our chair and move in a particular direction, we have kinetic energy. And Feynman found a rather clever way of expressing the laws of physics, which has always meant a great deal to me, that when a particle or something moves from A to B, it moves along the path corresponding to the least average difference between potential and kinetic energy. Now, I say to my son and anyone who needs a little bit of support psychologically or philosophically or spiritually, if you will, that inside you, you have a light. And quite often, tragically, no one sees the light on the outside, and you quite often, if you've been told often enough of what you can't do, you don't see the light on the inside. But if you allow that light to guide you through life, you'll go along a path corresponding to the least average difference between your potential of what you might be and your kinetic of what you are in the process of becoming. And within each of us, we have a concept that's very close to our souls, I believe, of truth. We may not be physicists or applied mathematicians, but just to illustrate how that applies, when I see the Twin Towers, where there are 10-ton girders being ejected on a parabolic arc from the top of the towers and landing an estimated 100 meters away. And you don't have to be a Feynman-style physicist to convince yourself that if the steel inside those twin towers was buckling from heat, the girders, the 10-ton girders, would fall under gravity straight down. But they don't. They're ejected out sideways, parabolically, probably 100 miles an hour. That means the towers were blown up. And that they were blown up right in front of the field of view of the people occupying the Salomon building on the 18th floor, which may or may not have included Phil's sister and her lesbian mate, Leonora Guaria, who were in charge, respectively, of the Small Business Administration and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, both of which are parasitical structures designed at giving losers an opportunity to exploit the mass murder of their fellow citizens and confiscate their property. So, yeah, it's a fascinating concept, this energy thing. And if we look at JFK moving through Dealey Plaza, you can see on the zoomatics cameras provided by Peter Peterson, who I think back then was the director, if he may have been the president of Bell and Howell.
I got it right.
Here's a man with the motive, opportunity, and weapon to set up spread betting opportunities hosted by a bookmaker where large, dumb financial institutions, banks, insurance companies, and pension funds were enticed or entrapped into betting over or under the distance from the entry point into Dealey Plaza, where JFK would be shot. Unbeknown to the dumb outsider investors or punters, the bookmaker was in real-time contact with a red team and a blue team of experts, and the expert red team would be tasked, for instance, with shooting JFK as he entered the 22-yard box in that road through Dealey Plaza. But if they shot JFK before, then they would be killed. If they shot him after in that first yard, they would be paid 22 yards, that's the distance to the exit of the box, times a dollar figure. If you did that kind of thing today with Obama, I guess it would be $1 million a yard. But the point is, the red team and the blue team don't care whether it's a half white, half black mulatto pedophile in the White House or a high profile guy like JFK with his family, where I believe Joe Kennedy had arrangements with the Worshipful Company of Distillers for the whiskey market. These people, they're hired guns, but they're bonded into a vow of silence. This is where their potential energy will always entrap them into crimes where their souls will never be at rest. But going back to the red team, so the red team would have been hired through the Bullingdon Club and Rhodes Scholars to take JFK out in that first yard as he entered the box, and they were shooting at him from behind. There would be Bell and Howell zoomatic cameras, I would guess 5 or 10, at different places around Dealey Plaza to establish exactly when JFK was shot. And the role in cricket, that would be the job of the umpire who stands abreast of the wickets to watch whether the batsman leaves the crease, the popping crease, in which case if the wicketkeeper knocks down the wicket, that batsman's out. So there will be people placed in Dealey Plaza with a side-on view of that 22 yards, so they can point their zoomatic Bell and Howell cameras and determine exactly, coming back to the conservation, sorry, not the conservation, particle moves along the least average path between, energy path between its kinetic energy and its potential energy. When JFK moves forward, he's been hit from behind. So someone, call him the umpire, will have been able to transmit probably a television signal via Telstar to London, where the bets were being taken on the spread by bookmakers whose families probably go back to the 16th or 17th century in London. So a lot of big money was at stake that would have been lost or gained if JFK had been taken out before he entered that first yard. And then there'd be another umpire with the camera pointed at the last yard to pick up the point at which JFK's back of his head was blown off with the Harper fragment. That means the bullet's coming from the front, maybe the overpass or the grassy knoll, maybe two bullets. And you know what, Field, I've just been thinking.
Oh no.
The damage done to JFK's head, what does that remind you of?
The damage done to Pat Tillman's head.
And a little elementary school, right?
And where?
An elementary school, right?
You mean Sandy Hook?
Yeah, I mean, tell the audience what you remember of Wayne Carver's comments about what happened to the children's heads.
Well, off the top of my head, and by the way, just for the people at live stream, I'm going to give you 3 shots. Frontal, left. Things are thinner than they appear. Top. No holes in this head, except for the holes in my ears that I hear through, the holes in my nose that I breathe through, this one that I eat through. I think that's about it. I guess the pores in my head are also openings, but they're sort of small and you can't see them, I hope. I think that H. Wayne Carver was absolutely lying through his teeth, but here is what he said. I couldn't bear to show the photos or the bodies of the dead children to the surviving parents because each of the little children had been shot in the head 7 to 11 times. Interesting choice of numbers. 7 to 11. Yeah, like rolling dice, Carver. You and your fat boyfriend probably should get out of the United States of America before DMORD is exposed. And notice, I didn't say anything about Skokie, Illinois. I didn't say anything about the Chipper Shredder murder in 1986. I didn't say anything about your male lover, Pumpkin. And I didn't say anything about your connection to the fact that the same guns that you allege put 7 to 11, and notice I didn't say 6s and 7s, which would be chaos in England. So I didn't say 6 and 7, I did say 7 and 11. Now 7 and 11 is the holes he reportedly witnessed on each head of each child. And I'm just trying to demonstrate if I'm a troubled guy or if I've still got it all together. Off the top of my head, there were 20 children, 12 girls, 8 boys, 6s and 7s, and allegedly 6 adult victims. I'm putting this out as a question to anybody in the world that happens to hear this. Has anybody anywhere in the world ever seen or heard of any of the surviving family members laying eyes on any of the dead children? Because Fat Boy Wayne Carver, or his wonder trick called Pumpkin, they probably think that nobody in the world is capable of unmasking the liars that can be found with Janet Napolitano's parting Google bait. If anybody wants to find out why Janet Napolitano left and why she hasn't been replaced, and I'm going to go out on I'm going to suggest that Teresa Carlson, the FBI lady who is involved with, not Ray Kelly. Ray Kelly is the New York chief of police or something like that. There's also an FBI director in New York, and between Ray Kelly, Teresa Carlson, and the FBI director in New York, I find it interesting that they were all focused on Sikhs, S-I-K-H. In August, and if Bucky's here, he can correct me, but in August of 2012, these pesky lone gunmen, plural, I'll spell it, L-O-N-E, lone, gunmen, G-U-N-M-E-N. Truly, very verily, I say to you, if there was a lone gunman, it would be spelled M-A-N. No, the Sikh deal, Seek and ye shall find. Well, here's one for you, sweet cheeks, and I'm talking to the woman in Milwaukee, and you know who you are, don't you? Interesting that your male pal out in New York would be in a Sikh temple. I think it was in Queens, wasn't it? You can answer. Has the cat got your tongue? Um, yep. Teresa Carlson's pal in New York was in a Sikh temple in Queens, New York. Please correct me if I misspeak. It is in New York. I don't know if it's Queens. And frankly, at this point, what did four dead Americans matter? Right, Hillary? So I find it interesting that Teresa Carlson, who's the FBI director in Milwaukee, is involved in a false flag shooting in, it's not Cudahy, but it's right next door, and it's either Oaktown, Oaklawn, Oakwood. Oak is a mighty tree. And Oakdale? Is that it? Huh. Yeah. Yeah, New Nation heard from. You guys think that he comes in here to sleep. Actually, he's never fallen asleep during one of these shows.
Yeah, once.
You did?
Yeah.
No, I didn't see it. It must have been a brief.
Unobtrusively.
Unobtrusively. Well, I'm glad you didn't obfuscate. David, I'm getting a little digressive here, but I find it interesting that these serial false flag killings of innocent people simply in an attempt to have Piers Morgan turn into a fully developed male and signal such by doing two things: getting off American airwaves, telling us we should all become little lapdogs like him, and maybe when his testicles descend, if that ever happens, maybe he will realize it's perfectly okay for real men to protect real families, real children, and real women, and real property with handguns, AR-15s, or whatever it takes to dust off the people that are trying to take what is not rightfully theirs. That brings us back to Gareth Williams and brings us back to John Benet Ramsey. If anyone knows how to get a hold of John Benet Ramsey's father, I understand from a communication this week that he's very interested in getting focus back on his daughter's death. Apparently he and his wife were both disgraced by the whole thing. And disgraced is an interesting verb because disgrace means to remove grace. And grace, the only grace I'm aware of, is dispensed by only one entity or power. And I will be getting a lecture on that, if that's not right, as soon as the camera's off in about 1 hour and 8 minutes. But I've been graced greatly, and I know from where my blessings flow, but I've been graced, well, first and foremost, I've been graced with 63 years and 9 months on this side of the turf. And then I'm going to have a very brief, well, no, I'm not. I won't be there. According to John 14:2, when my bones and teeth are laid below the sod, I'll be elsewhere. Yeah, so I guess I'm never going on the other side of, this old house may go under the ground, but the inhabitant will not. David, these guys are such boneheads, arrogant boneheads at that they think that they can fill the Department of Homeland Security with a person like Ray Kelly, and they haven't even taken the time to Google DHS plus DMORT 5 plus HSEEP, yep, that's right, crisis actors plus vision box. And if you really want to get personal, now that we're no longer humble, put Janet Napolitano on the front of that 5-figure Google bait. So now it's 6. And then put Field McConnell on the back. So I'm, well, I didn't really like all the songs the Doobie Brothers had, but they had a song that I didn't care for musically, but I love the title, Taking It to the Streets. I think by putting Janet Napolitano and my own name on either side of that Google bait, that not only took out Janet from that job, it's my opinion, and my opinion will be validated or blown full of holes when we find out who, if any, is naive enough to step into Janet Napolitano's vacuum. Because the reason she didn't want to hang around DHS is not just because of what was planned for Atlanta, Georgia on the 4th of July, but these 3 Palin Dava pickles are still unaccounted for. and I don't know everything, I don't know much. But I know the last place they were allegedly recorded to have been physically was in Chicago. And I'm going to rattle off some names for anybody who wants to study these Palindaba pickles that went from Chicago to Frome, Frome, England, to Gibraltar. The search terms would be this: Palindaba, Pelinda, plus Blatchford, Blatchford, plus Shale. I think that's Christopher Shale's last name. I think it's Shale, Shale. Robin Cook's last name is Cook, Cook. Dr. David Kelly's last name is Kelly, Kelly. Sidebar to MI5 and Scotland Yard's and RCMP. Oops, that's not what I meant to say. I meant to say Cressida Dix Metropolitan Police. I think they're about ready to open up that case again, based on some information from us. But Christopher Shale, David Kelly, Robin Cook, Margaret Thatcher, David Cameron, Barack Obama, Jacob Zuma. I think I started way back when with Palindaba and Blatchford, and I ended up with Obama and Zuma. But if all those Google search terms are thrown into the mix, out comes the truth of 3 missing nuclear weapons, one of which may have been set for Atlanta. And as we end July, Abel Danger, now that we're no longer humble, we can take credit for a whole lot of good things. Illinois has approved concealed carry. Wisconsin has told the feds, don't come here looking for guns because they'll open up, basically we will open up on you. The constitutional sheriffs are standing up and letting the people in Washington, D.C., formerly known as Rome upon the Potomac, there's a constitutional sheriff out in California with a Italian last name who basically told the feds to get out of the woods, meaning we Californians own the woods, and you federal guys can take your little badges and take a hike. Maybe he said a flying leap, which brings us back to the 1937 Studebaker police car, Canton car number 11. I saw in a comment in the chat room, oh, drone warfare. Wish I knew more about drones. Of course, on the other hand, Judge Rosemary M. Collier wishes I never told her about drones. Right, Rosemary? Anyway, the Palindaba nukes have been silenced. In July, we prevented Atlanta. In July, we helped encourage the Illinois people to deal concealed carry. The fellow in central Wisconsin who told the feds that they can take their gun confiscation plans and apply them to cities where chickens live, like Boston. They won't float in Wisconsin. You guys may have forgotten it, but GTAC was a company that was mining taconite, whatever that is, in Ashland, Wisconsin, and they had a bunch of private goons, and these goons are so brave they wear a mask over their face. They had automatic weapons, and a bunch of the natives, notice my nice jerky nose. Anyway, the natives up in Ashland, Wisconsin didn't like being told they couldn't walk around their own woods, and so these candy-ass security people from Bulletproof Security, well, looks like you're not too bulletproof, buddy. Yeah, Abel Danger got rid of those guys. Then in mid-month, the 3rd week of the month actually, we were so tired of getting rid of bad people and supporting good people, we decided to take a plunge to Plum City, and we had people from Alabama, Canada, Arizona, and all over come up to Plum City. How many were here? Well, we know for sure there were 7 because there were 7 people whose photos were taken. There could have been more because there were 265 Harleys in Plum City on Saturday. Off the top of my head, that would have been the 20th of July. What if 35 or so of those 265 Harleys had a member of a 3-letter organization? Oh, these are just random, David, but ICE, FBI, DHS, those types of things. You know, a lot of the people that work there get paid $70,000 or $80,000 a year to do a job, once they find out who they're doing the job for and what the job ultimately leads to, they start wondering if maybe they should not have taken those jobs, but they're pretty well locked in. So to protect their family and protect their future, they don't rock the boat, but they give us all the rocks we need to sink the boat. And so, David, that's a short answer. Somebody put up a picture of an improved-looking queen, and it seems I've seen that face before somewhere. It looks like John McCain. So I guess this is McQueen telling me that I should remind people to Google these three names plus an act. John McCain, Tim Pawlenty, Field McConnell, treason. David, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So, working on this metaphor of the umpire, on the side of the trajectory taken by JFK in Dealey Plaza on November the 22nd, 1963, here's an example of an umpire with a camera, the side view of the trajectory taken by the weapons platform as it moved across the Pentagon lawn. And as we've covered before, but I think this is getting quite interesting in terms of the idea of spot fixing. You have a time of a date of September the 12th, 2001, which is obviously Melbourne or Pine Gap, where Bill Clinton was, or I think he went up to Queensland after his meeting with Andrew Peacock's daughter in Melbourne. And then 1737-19, which is the time in Moscow Daylight Time, apparently, which is the same as St. Petersburg, which is the time stamp from the GLONASS tracking and telemetry station in St. Petersburg, imputed into the timing of the Pentagon to confuse and disrupt the defenders. So my guess would be that you would have a huge amount of money under and over a spread yet to be defined to pay the bookmaker, which is the CAI private equity group headed up by Alexander Haig, the late Alexander Haig, taking bets on the destruction of the US Navy Command Center in the Pentagon. Because if you think about it, if you want to have your little New World Order operation, you don't stand a prayer as long as America is free and it has the world's most powerful Navy ever seen, bar, if you scale back the technology, the British East India Company, from which, for all I know, the American Navy might be derived, at least the kind of people who put some of that stuff together. So there would be an immense amount of money available for a bookmaker who could credibly offer odds of destroying the US Navy Command Center in the Pentagon on 9/11. Now, to have credibility like that, the bookmaker would have to have links with people working inside the offices of the US Navy Command Center. And happily for the conspirators, Alexander Haig, the company doing the upgrade, and I continue to shake my head at this,
EMEC.
the company doing the upgrade on the US Navy Command Center in the Pentagon and commissioning it for sabotage vulnerability testing on the morning of 9/11 was a company that's based in London, but for the purposes of the destruction of the US Navy Command Center, had a command and control operation in Vancouver, British Columbia, and that company is AMEC. And AMEC is at 425 Carroll Street, where H.A. Simons, which is a company that originated in Chicago, and the family came up to Vancouver to get into the timber business, was bought out by, I think the company's name is Agra, in 2000, and H.A. Simons had its offices on the 5th floor of 425 Carroll Street. And then in 2000, AMEC bought Agra and moved into the offices occupied for some decades, I believe, by H.A. Simons. What's so special about 425 Carroll Street in Vancouver? Well, down on the mezzanine, and I'm never quite familiar with the North American. What is a mezzanine? Is that the ground floor field?
No. Well, hang on, I'm getting an update from older statesman. Hang on, what?
I think it's a balcony.
We're answering two different ways. Clyde Holt believes it's a balcony. It's a level that's visible from below. So if you're on the main floor of the Minneapolis airport, well, that's another question. I think we ought to have another Plum City plunge so I can drive to the airport and use some of my sneaky ID cards to get through security. I mean, can you believe that someone that looks like me could possibly have two ID cards from Kazakhstan that would probably get me right through security over here? But I can test it sometime. In fact, it'd be my delight. Well, David, I'm going to answer your mezzanine thing. There's a mezzanine level of the airport in Minneapolis, and I think that mezzanine level is named because of the material on the floor, which I believe is mezzanine. And I'll bet you, I'm not in the chat room right now, I was Googling myself, pardon my expression, but I'm in the chat room now. And to prove it, I can tell you that Bucky Badger recently put up that AMEC was big in Atlanta. Well, of course they are. AMEC was big in 9/11. AMEC was big in the World Trade Building 7. AMEC was big in the trading floor of the Wall Street marketplace where they do all the stock stuff on 9/11. AMEC turned over the keys to Wedge 1 at 9 o'clock. Correct me if I'm wrong, David. It could have been 8 o'clock, but I think it was 9 o'clock in the morning on September 11th. AMEC handed the keys to Wedge 1 to some people that my sister probably was thinking would be good removed. AMEC dug a bunch of tunnels in Vietnam because B-52s flown by people like my dad. My dad, now here is a man. When I bring him troubles to share, oh, he's always there, my dad. That's Paul Peterson. My dad flew B-52s. B-52s carpet bombed some innocent people. Does that mean I'm no longer proud of my dad? No, of course not. My dad didn't know what I know. He knew some stuff about my sister that was enough to make an 85-year-old man cry, and I witnessed it. My mother, bless her heart, went to her grave not knowing about my sister, but having some really disturbing questions. Anyway, I answered those questions for my father, and in the week before his death, he started crying at his own kitchen table, saying, "Don't tell me anymore, because what can an old man do?" So I stopped telling him. But I can tell you this, that in the last 3 or 4 days of his life, he cried at what my sister was doing, and yet the last words out of his mouth were, "I have every reason on earth to be proud of you, Field." Then he went to sleep. Then he went to heaven. And if you want to get a roadmap, it's in John 14:2. Maranatha, before I start crying, do you think you could put up John 14:2 so everybody has a little hope? And David, you asked me a question, so if you ask me once more, I promise to answer it this time instead of going off on a rabbit trail. What was the question, David?
Yeah, what does mezzanine mean?
Yeah, I guess we don't know, but I'll tell you, of all these people here, we've got a library. Ginger, that's, I was going to say a librarian. Yeah, I got it right. Ginger and Sherlock were the two that I thought would have their answers, and they're in the chat room. In architecture, a mezzanine or entresol is an intermediate floor between the main floors of a building, and therefore typically not counted on among the overall floors of a building. Often, a mezzanine is a low ceiling and projects in the form of a balcony. The term is also used for the lowest balcony in a theater, or for the first few rows of seats in that balcony. The word mezzanine comes from the Italian word mezzano, meaning middle. And bread and butter chips. Oh, Craig, that's wonderful. I thought that was legit. He's got a picture of Bubby's pickles, and except for that's not Bubby, that's me in the picture. Craig, you're a master at what you do, and I'd like to think, well, no, I don't think, I know that we're on the winning side of this, and I've worked for some employers that have benefits, and I've worked for some employers that have good retirements, and I've worked for some employers that pay pretty well. I've never worked for any power, corporation, or entity that pays as well as God. And, from a worldly standpoint, what's the value of our work? I don't think the world can estimate the value of our work. But here's a play on words. And I know who's going to get this first. It'll be Craig, Anita, Ginger, and Mensa if he's here. David, I'm going to say a very, very common phrase right now. And then I'm going to ask you if you understand what I just said. And I think you're going to think you understand what I just said. And I think you're not going to understand what I just said. So here comes the phrase. Yeah, well, wait a minute. It's tough. The phrase that you're familiar with is 5-car. Yes. Okay, here we go. Ready for this, David? See if you can hear what I'm saying. 5-car stud. What did I just say, David?
5-car stud.
How do you spell the middle word?
5-card, C-A-R-D.
Aha! I thought so. What did you think I said? I'm talking to Clyde now, David. You saw I said it too, didn't you? Okay. David, this shows the power of being a cunning linguist. Last week, well, on Monday's show, when we had the show, some of the people that came to the Plum City plunge were aware that I had a 36 Studebaker called the 36 Stud. I didn't name it. I have a 40 Studebaker called WW2 KIA, World War II, Killed in Action. And I've got another 40 Studebaker with a 413. And I'll give you just a couple. Some people like it when I sing, David, so plug your ears. The fuel-injected Stingray and the 413 are revving up their mills, and it sounds real mean. Gotta be cool now, power shift, here we go. Super stock Dodge is heading out in low, and my fuel-injected Stingray's really starting to go. To get the traction, I'm a-riding the clutch. My pressure plate is burning, baby, she's too much. So anyway, David, the third stud was Tillman's Ghost. Now, how many Studebakers is that? That's 1, 2, 3. What you thought and what Clyde thought, and I think what most other people thought, but I think Craig would have heard it correctly, and I'm betting Atomic Betty would have heard it correctly. I did not say 5 C-A-R-D stud. I said 5-car C-A-R, 5-car stud, because between radio shows, between Monday and Wednesday, I arranged to become the proud owner of a 1942 Double Dater Coupe and a 1937 President Straight 8. And that President Straight 8, you can look at the Canton police car, or you can look at the gray car, which shows up as the Plum City police car. And the hood on those cars, and they're Studebakers, they're not Lincolns, they're not Packards. There's another snobby car I'm forgetting. They're not Cadillacs. You could land an aircraft on those hoods. That's how long they are. And strangely enough, a lot of our Dangerettes, and that brings us around to Agent Bean had a question about Agent Aquamarine Blue. David, this is totally unrelated to 5-car stud, which I'm going to work into chapter 23, since now there's 5 Studebaker cars that I appear to own. But I think that's a wonderful malaprop. If I say 5-car stud, everyone in the world is going to hear 5-car stud. And what I'm really talking about is another form of God's blessing, where He's allowed me to have a value system where I place no faith whatsoever in man-made financial systems. If men can make it, men can manipulate it. However, I place all my faith in God's words, and it says to me in Philippians 1:6, he who started a good work will not leave it unfinished. In fact, I'm going to go get it myself. I don't want to ask somebody else to get it. David, I'm going to go find Philippians 1:6, but in layman's terms, it says, relax. If I've started something good, I'm going to finish it. And the point is, if we're temporarily having some good success, we don't have to be paranoid about the success withering. All men wither like grass and pass away. But when God's involved in something, you can take it to the bank. And that's poor choice of words because I'm sitting in the bank and I just told you I have no faith in man's financial systems because I know and I've seen that they can be manipulated. How easily can they be manipulated? Oh, I had a judge named Dennis D. O'Connor look me right in the eye, and he was scared. I was looking at him like this, and I saw two things, one of which I'd never seen in my life, and one thing that I had seen. I saw fear, and that puzzled me because I'm about ready to blink. There, I knew I was going to blink. That's why I said I was going to blink, because I didn't want you to think I was being stared down by this black-robed judge. But Judge Dennis D. O'Connor looked me in the eye right before he lied to me, and he had fear in his eyes. I recognized that, but I'd never seen evil. The date was the 27th of May of 2003, and I saw evil in his eyes, and that made me feel a little uncomfortable because I'd never seen it before, and I knew exactly what I was looking at, and I wondered what evil he was planning and for whom. Well, he was planning to take a 161-acre farm from me fraudulently. He who laughs last laughs eternally, Dennis. He didn't just take a 161-acre farm from me fraudulently. He took away a lot of regrets, a lot of problems. The farm I had in Clay County, Minnesota, a lot of people around there envied it. They didn't know how muddy it was, how cold it was, how mosquito infested it was, how the landing on the second floor, which was a lot like a mezzanine, it was starting to sag, and even though it was a 1978 house. But God in his grace and mercy arranged for this dolt of a judge to commit a felony, which will be visited again, assuming I live more than a year and a half. And I think, well, first of all, if I died right now, I think while you're sitting there going, Field, are you there? I think Clyde would help himself up. He'd say, just a minute, David, I'm coming. And he'd come over and he'd look in the camera and said, Field's laying here on the floor dead, at least his body is, but he's smiling because he's in a better place now. Well, the same deal. Many of you people listening during the last 2 weeks of July, which we're still in, had a chance to come up to my farm in Wisconsin. And while none of you have ever been to my farm in Minnesota, you can, if you were to be on both pieces of property, you could have seen God's hand in getting me away from the mosquitoes, away from the mud, away from the frigid Fargo reality, and placing me high on a hill where I can communicate with him even better because I'm at the top of the hill, so I'm just a little eensy bit closer to him, even though he's here right now with us and with you, David, because he has blessed Abel Danger, and I get a kick out of that because there is no Abel Danger, even though, oops, it's a little shy, but there's an Abel Danger t-shirt right down there. There's a whole bunch of Abel Danger glasses back there. And so does Abel Danger exist? I don't know. Ask Janet Napolitano. She apparently thinks it did. David, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Field. And news in plane caught fire at Vancouver International Airport in Richmond, BC. Just to remind listeners that McDonnell Detweiler's base is in Richmond, British Columbia. I was out there in 1995 meeting John McDonnell, the founder of the company, and I started some preliminary discussions on behalf of my former employers in the United Kingdom, company by the name of Rakel, which makes frequency hopping military radios, amongst many other things, on the possibility of buying McDonnell Detweiler. And this guy, and that was 2 episodes in my life in BC, where I looked and was talking to someone, and a look of sheer terror, which I didn't understand back then, this was 1995, went across this guy's face, and I thought to myself, what is this guy scared of? And he was scared to death of something. Anyway, we now know that McDonnell Detweiler in 1979 had been given a contract by the federal government to develop a remote or portable repeater 2-way radio system to get in between the Vancouver police and the RCMP and the dispatch services, ostensibly to improve communications from crime scenes to crash scenes or whatever, but of course opening the door to what are known as man-in-the-middle attacks. Because if someone calls in and reports an accident or a crime, such as Patsy Ramsey did on the morning after Christmas Day in 1990 in Boulder, Colorado, around, I think, 6 o'clock in the morning, and she calls in to the 911 to report, and I'm not quite sure, maybe someone in the chat room can check that, when she reported the ransom note. But she said her daughter was missing, and the dispatcher, who I now believe had been equipped or was targeted or was a victim of the technology developed by McDonnell Detweiler in BC in the late 70s, dispatched a detective Arndt, A-R-N-D-T, that is a female detective with googly eyes, to the scene of the apparent kidnapping of John Benet Ramsey. Now, whether or not, maybe someone could check, Patsy Ramsey said there's a ransom note. When Detective Arndt arrived, there was a ransom note available for her inspection. And I'm going to test you here, Phil.
Oh, goody. I'm ready for the test. In fact, watch this. As Clyde is my witness, I am in a serious mood. I'm sitting in an erect fashion because Ginger likes it that way. I've got my back against the wall, my head against like this. I'm ready to go. I'm perfectly straightened out.
Okay, here's the test. Detective Arndt arrives at the John Benet Ramsey house.
I got the answer.
All right, go ahead.
She should have called in the FBI because the murder victim was a young kid.
Not, well, very close, not quite. The apparent kidnap victim was under the age of 16. They didn't know that the child had been murdered. All they knew was that there was an appearance of a kidnapping and an abduction. And apparently, under the age of 16, someone can check that, the FBI should automatically be called in.
That's what I said, David.
You said murder.
I know, and she was murdered, right?
No, but you said, anyway, we're splitting hairs.
No,
as I understand it, technically, it's not that the child was murdered, it's the child was reasonably believed to have been kidnapped and is under age of 16, and therefore that should trigger the automatic request for the FBI to send in people, irrespective of whether the child has crossed state boundaries or whatever.
No, we're not splitting hairs, we're agreeing. I'm just trying to show you how lightning quick I am, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it's been both. Sometimes, like in William Tell 86, the fact that I'm quicker than whatever worked out well to the benefit of the Americans who like to think that their military can take care of business. Sometimes when you think of something snide or humorous and it hurts someone's feeling, you wish you weren't quite so quick. So anybody who's ever met me in person probably has never heard me say an unkind word to anybody, because when I was younger, I used to say some things quickly because I could think faster than I could filter. and I caused some people to feel bad, and I'll go to my grave wishing I could have a couple of statements back. One statement, well, I'll just keep the statements to myself. If anybody that sees me in person asks me which two statements I'd like to have back and to whom they were spoken. And they were just the words of a young person that hadn't found out yet that when you hurt someone's feelings, those feelings really never recover. So I'm not trying to split hairs, David. I'm just trying to show you that sometimes it's okay to be quick, because whoever responded to these crime scene in Colorado on that Christmas morning should have quickly called in the FBI, knowing that the victim, whether they'd seen her or not, or knowing that the victim was in this condition or that, or was stolen or was not, or was kidnapped or was not, or was murdered or was not. It's better to have too much of a response than a lackluster response. And I'm going to step out now as an individual and say that I would hold that woman who responded, I'd hold her partially accountable for the poor investigation of what really happened to John Benet Ramsey on Christmas morning 1996. Over to you, David.
Now, with the John Benet Ramsey murder, let's go back and turn the clock back. So the McLean Group buys Vancouver Film Studios, I think changed its name in the 80s, and starts to develop the technology, or adopt the technology developed by McDonnell Detweiler for the Vancouver Police and the RCMP and the 911 emergency response dispatchers. So McDonnell Detweiler technology allows you to launch a man-in-the-middle attack on the communications links between an accident scene or a crime scene and the dispatcher, and deploy in advance of the crime or the accident actually happening, red team and blue team players to position the event, and that's called spot fixing, within the spread. So in the case of John Benet Ramsey, the conspiracy was, I believe, involving rather massive betting on either side of the event. The time on Christmas Day, which of course is sacred and profane in many ways, and a particularly delightful experience for most children and the families, what the red and the blue team and their paymasters, which we now know to be the CAI private equity group, want to do is to ridicule and humiliate people participating in what are normally joyous events. And one of the technologies that stood in the way of McDonnell Detweiler's man-in-the-middle attacks on strategic American targets in the United States of America would have been the Sun Microsystems workstations installed in the US Navy Command Center in the Pentagon for the purposes of counterintelligence, monitoring the worldwide SIPRNet and NIPRNet. That's the secure internet protocol router networks and the non-secure internet protocol router networks. So for Alexander Haig and the still living, I think he died in 2010, actually not far distant from Alexander Haig, but John Profumo and Alexander Haig were both very active in the 90s, getting ready for the attempted overthrow of the government of the United States on 911.
He's still awake.
So with Profumo and Haig in this position, they knew from a propaganda and strategic point of view, they needed to get the boss of the company installing the Sun Microsystems workstations in the US Navy Command Center to step aside so they could replace that technology, the workstation technology, with what is known today as the cloud. Because from within the cloud, they could launch a man-in-the-middle attack. The technology was coming from McDonnell Detweiler, and so they needed to eliminate any resistance or objections from the CEO of Access Graphics, which had the contract for installing Sun Microsystems in the US Navy Command Center, and that man's name was John Bennett Ramsey. Now, rather than kill the man, apparently he's a Navy very capable individual and a very good businessman, and he had this contract. So how to get rid of him? Well, these guys decided that what they'd do is they'd kill his daughter on Christmas Day by basically hacking a ceremony that had been taking place since, I believe, 1947, which is the year that Jack Profumo got his bronze medal. Maybe it's a bit later than that. Run by NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense, called the NORAD Santa program. And the NORAD Santa program, through Cheyenne Mountain, allows you to inject the signals that simulate Santa and his reindeer coming from the pole and delivering presents for the children, not necessarily just on Air Force or Army bases, but civilians as well. So for about 46 years or so, the NORAD Santa program had been run out of Canada, injecting radar signals into the poor, dumb American families who thought they were giving a treat to their children. And the guy in Canada who was designing the electronic warfare aspect of the NORAD Santa program, where it would be used as camouflage, an actual trip in a Bombardier combat support aircraft for pedophile extortionists, was a man by the name of Russell Williams, who's now in jail, who's a pedophile psychopath, who I alerted, not directly, but indirectly, Prime Minister Stephen Harper at a barbecue in August of 2009, warning him of a threat to the Vancouver 2010 Winter Olympics being coordinated by John Furlong, Chief Executive Officer of the Vancouver Olympic Committee, whose wife was murdered in Ireland a couple of days before the Boston bombing. Back to McDonald Detweiler. So McDonald Detweiler builds the software and hardware platforms that allow man-in-the-middle attacks on the links between a crime scene and its emergency responders and the 911 dispatch. McDonald Detweiler begins to equip Vancouver Film Studios, owned by the McLean Group, with this technology so it can do hybrid film production of adventures on top of mountains like James Bond, etc., etc. So Vancouver Film Studios begins to develop this Cisco-based technology where it can actually inject a wag the dog story into the real media so that the observers can't distinguish between what's the wag the dog story and what's the real news. Jason McLean goes to, I think, Simon Fraser University in the 90s. And in 2000, goes to work in the office of the Prime Minister of Canada. Back to 1996. So someone in the sphere of influence of little JonBenet Ramsey, who's a beauty queen or goes in for beauty queen contests with her mother, and that's okay, except my understanding is that's a magnet for pedophiles. Somehow or other, JonBenet Ramsey believes that she's going to get a visit by Santa Claus on Christmas Day. Tells her little friend, who tells her little friend's mother, who says to JonBenet Ramsey, but you know, JonBenet, that Santa comes on Christmas Eve. And little JonBenet Ramsey says, no, he's coming for me on Christmas Day. So John Benet Ramsey goes to bed on Christmas Day. I don't know, 9 o'clock or whatever little girls go to bed in that household. The parents retire to their bedroom. At 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, the day after, we call that in the UK Boxing Day, Patsy Ramsey goes to her daughter's room to get her ready for a visit, finds her gone, finds the ransom note or not, but calls 911, and 911 dispatches Detective Arndt. And this, I believe, is a man-in-the-middle attack on the John Benet household, the 911 number, and the Boulder Police, and the not the RCMP, the FBI, because there are players within that group who sabotage the appropriate response to the abduction of a minor. So the FBI didn't come in, which meant that the crime scene would have been under the control of the red team and the blue team. Now, I think, and it's pretty horrible to imagine it, but the images of the rape and torture of little John Benet Ramsey were broadcast or backhauled live via satellite to the place where spread betting was taking place. And remember, this isn't just a little 6 or 7 year old girl. It's a little 6 or 7 year old girl whose father has the contract for installing counterintelligence hardware in the US Navy Command Center in the Pentagon, which is a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin. And at the time of Christmas Day of 1996, two directors of note of Lockheed Martin include Norman Mineta, who would go on to become Transportation Secretary and the only holdover from the Clinton government to the Bush government, and the former boss of Field Sister Christine Marcy at the Office of Economic Opportunity, a man by the name of DeCheney, who apparently has a lesbian wife. So my guess is the red team and the blue team at the crime scene would have been battling to kill the little girl just at the beginning of the spread, or just at the end of the spread, in order to get the spot at which she's died. And for all I know, they were measuring her heartbeat or whatever, to get it within the spread, because the red team and the blue team knew that if the girl died before or after the spread, they would be killed and exposed. So the internal binding of this conspiracy, which is global, is you get to play on the red team and the blue team, provided you are ruthlessly efficient and you position the event within the spread. So the bookmaker doesn't have to pay out a large amount of money, and the bookkeeper can collect the 15% vigorish from the under and the over bettors, and then distribute that amongst the red and the blue team. Flipping over or flipping back to the assassination of JFK, the two teams, the red and the blue team, would have got paid out based on the distance from the exit when the entry shots hit JFK, and the distance from the entrance of the box to just before the exit when another set of shots hit JFK. It's kind of counterintuitive, but you can see it's really very coercive for the red team and the blue team, because they get to be exposed or killed if the spot is before or after the spread. But once it's inside the spread, they can get to be very rich. But of course, there's a competition there, because if the red team actually kills or stops the car from running, in the case of JFK, right at the beginning, then the blue team doesn't get the hit, and the blue team doesn't get any money. So I don't know if that's confusing, Phil, but my voice is tired. Over to you.
Yeah, good old Field. Always there when somebody needs to go to the bathroom, have a meal, walk a dog, or get a tired voice. And I'm just splitting hairs. I mean, I'm not splitting hairs. I'm just cajoling you, David. I'm not sure what cajole means, but I know some people who could probably explain it to me. But David, have I told, this is, I want to save your voice. Have I explained to you ever what leverage or arbitrage is all about?
Yeah, I did, Phil, but it's your techniques at explaining things to me are so inimitable that I never quite grasped the full concept of what you're trying to say.
Taint that the truth. David, leverage and arbitrage are some skills that any OODA looper from John Boyd down to Uncle Remus probably should. And notice I didn't say anything about the house on Pooh Corner. But I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna leverage the United States government, or I'm gonna arbitrage the Federal Aviation Administration. Are you with me so far? Yes or no?
Yes.
I haven't told anybody except in the chat room, and I didn't explain it verbally. And Pastor Holt doesn't know what's coming, not because I'm being secretive. It's just that I'm so busy every day, all day long, that I'm visibly tired but not shaken. The United States government, Clyde, has just put out a calling all cars signal, if you will, for retired airline pilots to please come help the United States government ensure the safety of the traveling public. Now, an arbitrage or a leverage is when you do something to someone who, no matter what they, how they respond to me, they're dead in the water. So now I'll put the camera off Clyde and put it back on me since we're not supposed to be humble anymore. Okay, David, the truth is, and I put it up in the chat room, and as soon as I come up for air, I'll put it up again. Yesterday, I got an email from a guy named Mike. His last name was not H-U-N-T. However, oh, these guys are so dead in the water. Okay, this friend of mine, Mike, was given a line check. That means there was a air carrier inspector. That means civilian FAA guy sitting on the jump seat watching my friend Mike be the captain of a Boeing 757 or 767 on a flight from Las Vegas to Hotlanta, which is the way people down in Georgia, even Ringgold, Georgia. Ringgold, Georgia, gee, where have I heard that before? Well, how about Barbara Leigh? And that's spelled L-E-I-G-H. Get your mind out of the gutter, ginger cookie. Barbara Leigh grew up, she had a father, obviously she had a father, but I mean, she had a father in her family, but like a lot of young fathers find out, in fact, there's two of us in this room that were young fathers that found out the pressures on a young father to care for all of his kids. You know, people have to work pretty hard to get it done. Some people take the easy way out and leave the family behind. And you can't exonerate them for that, but you can somewhat commiserate with them. But the way I'm about ready to hammer the government is I'm going to put in an application to get one of they're called Section 1825 air carrier inspector jobs. They need lots of help. And I'm not saying this facetiously. They're looking for a lot of retired pilots to come back and get a little FAA government ID and go riding around in cockpits observing the performance of the airline crews from all the airlines operating with Part 121 certificates within the United States. The job opens at $70,000 a year. What do? You ride along in air-conditioned comfort, eating your choice of crew meals, because the way it works is when the captain's meal comes forward, if he wants to do well on his check ride, he might say, you know, I just ate at the last stop. Would you like this meal? And the guy that does two things. Gives him something to do, because these guys typically are cheap. So he sits there and eats a free meal. And also, for every time he looks at his plate to see where he should stick his fork, he's not looking at what you're doing. So like in my case, once we had a flap handle that didn't work. And so the air carrier inspector never noticed when we took off for Denver in an MD-80 heading for Minneapolis that my hand never left the flap switch. And the reason my hand never left the flap switch is there were no detents So if I put the flaps at 11 or flaps at 18, they would move. That kills people. And we didn't want to kill anybody. We also didn't want to be shut down maintenance-wise in Denver. We also didn't want this guy having a free crew meal on the jump seat, figuring out what's going on. And so on that day in history, thinking back to when Sherlock said something about fast slapping Trinity, gunslinger in the movie Trinity, Trinity is Still My Name, and I forgot the name of the third Trinity movie. There were three of them. Interesting that Trinity should have three movies. Anyway, I forgot what the question was. I've confused myself with all this meandering. But the arbitrage that I'm going to get back to the leverage is, I'm going to apply for one of those jobs, David. Now, first of all, I think I know what you're going to say. David, yes or no, would you like me to apply for that job if you thought I would get the job and take it? Yes or no?
No, I think you've got too many important things to do.
That's what I thought. But would you see well, we don't have to be humble anymore, and it is good to irritate your enemies. Would you see the genius in applying for the job and on the application saying, I believe I'm the most safe airline pilot in the United States of America because I'm the guy that exposed the Strangler suite of illegal modifications to the federal government in civil case 1:08-1600, parentheses RMC. Now, if I were to apply and I put that on my application, do you think they would give me the job, yes or no?
No.
I agree with both your answers. I think that would be a very good, very strategic, very legitimate, and very free way to make some big shots. Oh, get nervous. So David, I'm going to apply for that job. And I didn't tell you the good news. After you've been there for maybe 3 months, it goes from 70 to 100,000. And still, you do nothing but hold down a seat, eat crew meals, and see what the backside of a retreating flight attendant looks like after they bring the crew meals up. It would be delightful work. But no, I don't want a job either. I'm pretty busy right here 3 days a week. But I am going to apply for that. And you can probably predict, and I'm sure that if Craig is still listening, or if Atomic Betty's still listening, they probably have already smiled knowing that if I apply for that job, my application will be on the internet before the government office that turns me down will ever see it. Because I'll put it up on the internet before I send it in. I'll send it in overnight mail with electronically guided. You got to sign for it, and I'm tracking it, and I'm putting it on the internet. And so when you turn me down for the job, you'll make me smile. And you'll make other people hark back to the 1970 movie called Trinity. David, over to you. How do you like my arbitrage? I think he fell off his chair. David, are you dead?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So, yeah, my earphones just fell into my lap and caused havoc. But, yeah, going back to Christmas Day, so my guess is that the red and the blue team to position the torture death of John Benet Ramsey within a spread determined by bookmakers operating perhaps in London. When they secured all of the various elements needed for a money shot snuff film and had run it through a post-production unit, archived the snuff film probably in the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank Corporation headquarters building at Canada Square, for use subsequently in extorting concessions from the various players associated more or less directly with John Benet Ramsey. And of course, the father went on 18 months of grieving leave, and Access Graphics, which had the Sun Microsystems workstations in the US Navy Command Center, was sold by Lockheed Martin, directors Lynn Cheney and Norman Mineta, to General Electric, which would go on much later to form a partnership with Vivendi and buy various film assets of NBC and Universal and make the film United 93. So it's an extraordinary theory, I think, that what Jason McClain would have done, or his father, would have deployed the Cisco production technology with a man-in-the-middle hack set up by McDonald Detweiler in Richmond, BC, to record a snuff film by disrupting the communications between the place where the crime is committed and the 911 people. So the 911 people send in crony investigators to make sure that the crime scene evidence is manipulated and adjusted to put it at sixes and sevens, as we say in the UK. And for the next, I believe, 5 or 6 years, the principal suspects were the parents, which gave a number of key people in the octopus, I believe, a false confidence that they were home free. Well, they're not. So Jason McClain is at Simon Fraser University. McDonald Detweiler has developed or built this man-in-the-middle technology with Cisco and Nortel that's been adopted by the American military, so that anywhere in the world the United States military is in action is being monitored by, first of all, Canadian intelligence, and then behind them, British intelligence, to create man-in-the-middle attacks. Simple, the USS Cole going into Aden Harbor was backdoored by McDonald Detweiler, which was able to send a false command to the bridge to have it go into Aden Harbor for refueling by the dock when it should have stayed outside to be refueled at sea. A Zodiac comes in between the USS Cole and the dock, and it's positioned with spread betting to achieve a certain body count, because it could be positioned 2 feet, and had it been positioned right by the magazine, it would have blown the thing to a million bits, but they wanted about, I think, 18 dead. So they set off a timed explosion to get 18 dead and show the humiliation of the United States Navy's most advanced frigate being brought back on a platform boat for repairs. You have the bombing of the USS Embassy, again, where it would appear to a casual observer that the American military is incompetent, as with Benghazi. But that's the objective of the bookmaker and the red and blue teams, to make regular folks look incompetent, stupid, etc., etc. So in 1996, the Starnet company at 425 Carroll Street in Vancouver, immediately beneath H.A. Simons, on the mezzanine floor, and I think when you define mezzanine, it made me think of man in the middle field. The Starnet Communications Company gets into internet pornography. Apparently, it's interactive internet pornography, where you can, through bidding or signals, two-way signals, raise the level of cruelty in the sadistic and masochistic treatment of a victim. And in fact, at 425 Carroll Street, they had torture chambers. In 1996, at the end of it, they were making a great deal of money on internet pornography of the most brutal kind. And this is Vancouver. I'd been in Canada and BC about 4 years at the time. Within 3 weeks of arriving, I felt myself to be the most corrupt jurisdiction I worked in the world, but I couldn't put my finger on it. But I did sometimes go into the downtown east side, and I saw the depths of depravity down there, which is really quite amazing for what's supposed to be a West Coast paradise. Anyway, so Starnet goes into online gambling and money laundering. So it's very simple. They entrap people with internet pornography involving children. They extort those individuals, including the trustees of big pension funds, to participate in spread betting, where they're told, if you don't bet, and it's a pay-to-play formula, then your pension fund might be heavily invested in Nortel, and you're going to lose $150 million from your pension fund, and maybe your pension fund's going to go bankrupt. So regular folks, rank and file, firefighters, police, emergency responders, they don't necessarily get the full picture, but their trustees do. They're basically told to participate in mass murder. And then a few corrupt insiders are deployed as red team and blue team to make sure that the spot fits within the spread. So the raid of 1999, August the 22nd, I think, of 1999, Christine Marcy and her SES goons and her marshals and scumbags with the IRS joined the RCMP, Bob Paulson, in a raid on the premises of Starnet at 425 Carroll Street. And I thought originally that they took the hardware, the software, and the encryption tools to the Salomon building in New York. But I think they might have taken one or two for the 18th floor. But all they did actually, it would seem, is they moved the Starnet communication system for interactive pornography and online gaming and money laundering up 4 floors into the offices of what would become AMEC Canada. So by the time of 9/11, the Starnet platform for snuff films and online gaming and money laundering was at 425 Carroll Street on the 5th floor in real-time communications with the Cisco links to the Pentagon and the Twin Towers. And so it's highly possible that Jason McLean and his cronies at 425 Carroll Street would take bets on the number of firefighters to be killed in the demolition of the Twin Towers. So that's 157 Field. It's near closing time. Over to you.
The girls all look prettier at closing time. Anyway, I'll put that song in chapter 23 if somebody.
Hey, Phil,
Yep.
we had about a minute and a half for a lesson in prayer.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, hang on a minute. We're going to have, Clyde's going to get us to run over here, and that's okay when you know the subject. Go ahead, Clyde.
Okay, Field was mentioning earlier in the program about praying, talking to God, and sometimes people think that's complicated, sometimes they think it's impossible. I had an experience about a month ago in the jail over at Eau Claire when I was ministering to a bunch of prisoners there. That kind of illustrates how easy it is. When the Bible study was over, as the prisoners were filing out, one of the real young ones, I'd say maybe 19 or 20, maybe 21, stopped, and he had been really impressed by what he'd been hearing the last 2 or 3 weeks about God, and I think it probably had no previous encounter with God whatsoever. And as he walked by, he said to me, he said, "Could you teach me to pray?" And he was leaving with the block of prisoners, and he was a straggler at that point, and they're not supposed to be any stragglers. They're all supposed to leave in a group. And I said, "Well, we don't have time to go into a lesson on prayer right now." He said, "Well, I was just hoping that you could teach me to pray." So I said, "Look at me." He looked at me. I said, "Am I a person?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Can you talk to me?" He said, "Yes." I said, "God is a person, and you can talk to him." And he'd give me a big grin, a big smile, and turned to walk out, and then he turned back again and said, "But what would I say?" I said, "Anything that's on your heart. God wants to hear from you, so talk to him." And he gave me another big smile and walked out. I haven't seen him since. But my guess is he's probably talking to God today.
Thank you very much, Pastor Clyde Holt. And just for the rest of you out there that probably know, I usually call for the red button around 4 o'clock. I'll be calling for it shortly after David has a chance to say his closing remarks. But there's a lot of chatter going on in the chat room about colloidal silver and asking people for brands. I've been very well served by Utopia Silver in Texas, and Utopia Silver is in Utopia, Texas. Sounds lovely. I bet it's not. If I were going to go to Texas, if I could take all of you with me, we could make 3 stops. Of course, we'd stop at the F4, since that's sort of personal, and I don't mean in a snobby way. I see what God has done with that airplane. There's 5,194, roughly, maybe it's 5,180 F4 Phantoms that have been built. So of all the surviving F4 Phantoms out there, the chance that an aircraft that not only I flew a lot, but it actually, I think you could Google Field McConnell's F4 and you'd find it, and that just shows you the power of Google to mess things up, because I don't have an F4. It was not my F4. It was God's grace that allowed me to fly that F4, and it was, I believe it was God's micromanagement that allowed that F4 to be transferred to my home state of Texas and end up in the Canton Museum. And here we go again with all these micromanaging God things, but he's got me driving 4 limousines from Canton, Georgia, buying a 1937 Studebaker that's a spitting image of the police car in Canton, Ohio, that weighed 5,400 pounds, could go 95 miles an hour, had 1.5-inch bulletproof glass, was ordered with steel that was capable of withstanding and turning away a .45 caliber slug. So the other 2 places that would be fun to go for different reasons would be Utopia. That's where they give out the silver, and they give it out. Actually, I think it's very inexpensive, especially if it does what I've been told it does for your health. But I've been taking the silver, and it's not like I'm doing an advertisement for Utopia Silver. It's just that I'm a simple human, and I've only taken 1 brand of silver, and it's Utopia. The company is rock solid. When they send something to a cold climate, they mark on the box, "Do not freeze." So the post office in Plum City says, "Oh, Field's getting some beer or freeze, or who knows what Field's getting, but let's not freeze it." So then they call me and say, "Hey, Field, you got a package down here." But that's a very responsible company that doesn't allow your silver, which is liquid, tastes just like water. And that's because it is. It's water with silver in it. The other place I'd like to go is Dripping Springs, because that's just such a rich metaphor. I've been close to Dripping Springs. In fact, there's been a bottle of Dripping Springs that stood behind me during one of the radio shows, and more than one person after the show emailed me and says, "Field, I don't think it's very professional to be on the air talking about the serious things you talk about with a bottle of vodka behind you and you drinking out of it." Uh-oh, here we got arbitrage. That was an empty bottle of Dripping Springs vodka, and there was water in it. So each time I poured myself a glass of something in an Abel Danger shot glass, if shots are 16 or 32 ounces, people thought that I was drinking vodka, and I wasn't. I was drinking water. But that's just like on 9/11. People thought they saw airliners flying into the World Trade 1 and 2. They didn't. They saw drones. David, that's enough. I don't want to drone on and on. But why don't you give us your parting shot, and then I'll look for the big red button, and we'll call it a day.
Okay, thank you, Field. And so, red blue teams, spread bet spot fixing, and JFK and John Bonet. And over and out.
Okay, over and out to you. I've just put up a message where I say, "Big red button, please." Oh, there's a nice picture. Well, once again, thank you, John Profumo, CCW, Agent Skymaster, for putting that picture up. I've never seen that picture before, but that is the tail of 640965. It's got the wrong tail flash on it, which is fine with me because I was born in Texas. That tail flash right under the number 640965, which is right under the formation light. It's that yellow strip light. It looks yellow in the daytime. You turn them on at night, and it's luminescent green. And if you want to, I don't know if there's any tape out there. There's got to be. Something spooky in a good way is when you're flying formation in the F4 or something else with strip lights. That's what those are called, strip lights. They're really formation lights. They turn everything luminescent green. So there you are, flying along in the dark next to another airplane that's the cricket pitch. Thanks again, another nice picture. A cricket pitch is 66 feet long. An F4 Phantom is about 66 feet long. It's not, it's 63 feet, depending on which model. So when I say about 66 feet, that's okay too. So whether it's a cricket pitch or an F4 Phantom, Abel Danger, is going to arbitrage and leverage the people that like to go around hurting little girls, breaking the hearts of fathers, and destroying the moral fabric of England, Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, India, South Africa, and every other country. David Cameron, your morality really stinks, and you can keep it over there. And maybe the Islamic hordes who are outpopulating you, 7 kids to 1, will take pity on you, and you're sorry. I got some more pictures coming, and I don't enjoy looking at pictures of myself because it makes me understand how old I'm getting. It may look old on the outside, but it feels young on the inside, except for my left knee, which hurts. So if somebody would give me the 3, 2, 1, push it, I promise to get off and go on to Bible study at John's house tonight. What time is that, Pastor Clyde?
5:30.
Uh-oh. 5:30?
Supper 5:30.
Yep. I've just been called. In fact, in chapter 3, you're going to see a song by, what's his name? Warren? No. I can picture him. Walter Brennan, Supper Time. Have you ever heard that song? Supper Time by Walter Brennan? Yeah. It had, oh, there's the 3, 2, 1. I see, oh, I got to get busy. I don't see the red button. Somebody tried to get me to push on the non-button command. Okay, let's see. Now, does anybody see a red button? I've got the 3, 2, 1, push it, so when the button comes up, you'll see this finger. I think my cell phone's about to ring. I don't know why I said that. Maybe I'm mimicking Gary Berghoff. Okay, I don't see, whoops, a blonde moment. That's, if the blonde moment operator, who also has a hourglass figure, would push up a red button, I promise to push it since I've already got the 3, 2, 1, push it. Do-de-do. I don't, oh, I know how to get people to put up a red button. I'm going to sing a Walter Brennan song until that red button goes up. That'll make the button go up quickly. Walter Brennan had a song called Old Rivers.